stunning reversal. Bryan Kohberger wants to withdraw his plea deal and go to trial for the 2022 murders of 4 University of Idaho students. In new handwritten court documents filed Monday, Kohberger claims his lawyer was ineffective, telling him death row was imminent, and he was advised to lie to escape the death penalty. In a statement to the New York Times, Kohberger says the plea was based on false promises and blatant disinformation. The plea deal struck last year, just weeks before a trial was set to begin.
Are you pleading guilty because you are guilty?
Yes.
Kohberger is serving 4 consecutive life sentences. The family of one of the victims, Kaylee Goncalves, reacting to this new legal move, calling Kohberger the mosquito you just can't seem to swat, adding he never cried foul, never claimed he was uninformed or pressured. At the time, the Goncalves family was upset by the plea deal. Now they are speaking out in a new Netflix docuseries premiering tomorrow.
The prosecutors gave him power. Monsters like that should never, ever, ever have options ever again.
The 3-part special follows the murders and the manhunt that shocked the country.
Say hi, Maddie.
4 students, Kaylee Goncalves, Madison Mogan, Ethan Chapin, and Xana Kernodle, all good friends, stabbed to death early in the morning in their off-campus home. The killer leaving behind a major key to the case.
We also found a knife sheath in the 3rd floor bedroom laying next to one of the victims.
Investigators also uncovered security footage they say showed Kohberger driving through the neighborhood on the night of the murders. The car later found at his parents' home in Pennsylvania, where Kohberger, a criminology student, was arrested after prosecutors say DNA from a Q-tip linked him to the crime.
The DNA on that Q-tip belonged to the father of the person whose DNA was on that knife sheath. There was only one male son in that family, and it was Bryan Kohberger.
Now, Kohberger says he welcomes a new trial, even if prosecutors put the death penalty back on the table, telling the Times in an interview from prison, "A lot went wrong in those plea discussions. I really do want that to be heard."
We reached out to Kohberger's attorney as well as the other families of the victims, but have not heard back. As for the Goncalves, they say they would have actually preferred a death penalty trial in this case, adding they believe fully in the evidence, guys.
Steph, thank you. Let's bring in our NBC News legal analyst, Danny Savalos, who is joining us now. Danny, good morning to you. So help us understand this, because people remember, I think, and Steph laid it out there, when he was asked, Kohberger was asked by the judge, are you pleading guilty because you're guilty? He said yes, repeatedly. How does he legally unwind that now?
When a defendant pleads guilty, a judge reads from a script. It's called a colloquy, and they ask them those questions. Are you pleading guilty because you are, in fact, guilty? Did your lawyers put you up to this? Is this the product of fraud or coercion? Or all these different questions that they ask for exactly this reason, to safeguard against a prisoner who later on decides, oh, you know what? I have buyer's remorse. My sentence, I didn't think I'd get this much. Let me try anything. And they frequently take the form of these handwritten PCRA petitions, habeas petitions that are statistically hopeless, to put it as simply as I can.
Well, you mentioned his lawyers. He says that they convinced him to falsely confess, citing false promises and disinformation. How would he prove that? And if he could, would a judge listen?
First, his defense team may have filed more motions in this one case than I have filed in my entire career. So, if nothing else, this was an example of a defense team. It's going to be very difficult to raise what's called ineffective assistance of counsel. And the other thing is, you often see this, that defendants, since it's their last chance, they'll argue, look, I was told I would get this many months and I got this many years and I misunderstood what I was pleading guilty to. There was no ambiguity here. This was somebody pleading guilty to intentional murder, not whether, hey, I had the drugs or he had the drugs. Very little ambiguity here. And a 5th grader could have understood what he was pleading guilty to. This was a PhD candidate who certainly could have understood what his lawyers were telling them. But again, this is usually the last ditch effort, the only avenue left after you've basically admitted to everything on the record.
Yet another gut-wrenching moment for the families of those victims. Danny Savalos, thank you very much.
All right, Nan, here we are. Welcome onto the show, LTL Media. It's nice to have you here once again. We've done a lot of these shows together, and I thought that it would be really great to bring you up here because this is kind of a nostalgia effect for us, because this is actually how you first discovered me. It wasn't actually through the Karen Reed trials. It was actually through my Kohberger coverage. And I remember reading your email many, many moons ago talking about this. And it's nice to have you up here and get your opinion about all this. I know that Kohberger has been kind of quiet, not in the sense we know that the files have been dumped. I actually downloaded, I went to Moscow PD's website last night. I downloaded them. I think that's something that I want to start going through here on my channel and kind of picking this case back up. Even though this appellate process is probably going to take quite some time, even if it happens, it could be a couple months, couple years or whatever it is. But I wanted to get you up here and hear kind of your take on all of this. So what do you make of this? We heard him actually plead guilty in court. He's very competent as to understanding. Now he's saying that it's ineffective counsel and that he wants to withdraw his plea. What's the percentage from 1 to 100 that this is actually going to get up and have a new trial here, Nan?
I think he's got, well, by the way, thank you for having me, Brian. I think he's got probably a 10% chance that he's going to get a new trial. This is, this case does have nostalgia for me, like you said. And also, if you recall, I was headed to your studio.
Yes.
It was June of 2025, and we were going to do a different show. And as I was driving to your studio, I don't know if you texted me or I walked in and you're like, Kohberger's pleading guilty. And I was like, what? And this case is so important to you and to me. It certainly brought me to your channel, and you did such great coverage of the Kohberger and Idaho for both aspects of it, both the criminology of it and the victimhood of it, that it means a lot. And thanks for having me, because I'm happy to discuss this. He's got maybe a 10% chance. This is, a lot of people don't understand what this is. So what he's done is he did not file a direct appeal. He has filed for post-conviction relief. And he has 2 grounds that he's citing, because if you all recall, when he pled guilty, and this is the document he wrote out, and often in my life, I'll say to people, you have the handwriting of a serial killer, but he really does have the handwriting of a serial killer. But I say to people all the time, like, think back to his plea. When he entered that plea, he was competent. I don't think a lot of people would argue with the statement or opinion that Ann Taylor did what appears to be a very good job for him. She was a zealous attorney on his behalf. Does that mean that she may not have made mistakes? No, but as that one correspondent said, there were more motions filed by his side than he had even filed over the course of his career. And I dare say the same over the last 25 years of my career. So in this appeal, which is for post-conviction relief, he can either show that he had ineffective assistance of counsel on a particular issue that's important, or that his plea was not knowingly and voluntarily entered. And I don't think he's going to have an easy road to try to prove either of those things. I mean, he's put it here in his statement. It's been all over the news and people are talking about it, but he's got an uphill battle. One of the things when I was thinking about what he's filed here, and he's been in communication with, I think his name is Michael Baker at the New York Times. He had put together a more poignant statement to Baker, and Baker is a journalist who had interviewed Kohberger's sister in recent months. And I thought it was interesting that Kohberger reached out to Baker. And when he did that, he gave a much more robust statement to him. And I put it here for you all to consider. He said, "I hereby declare my intention to enter a not guilty plea and welcome the state the opportunity to prove their case at trial, as well as to, again, file for the death penalty. My actual innocence is my truth, and the plea hinged on by false promises and blatant disinformation must be withdrawn. Circumnavigated by a broken plea, the trial never provided the public the clarity conducive to closure, and justice shall remain abjectly miscarried unless that plea is withdrawn." And when he put that together and submitted it to the New York Times, I was interested because it sure sounds like he thinks he's going to have a successful go at a trial. And I just think he's looking uphill. And as I think we're going to talk about tonight, even a major defense expert, I mean, this is unheard of, but a major defense expert is saying, now this guy is guilty.
Yeah, I mean, defense expert. Yeah. Cy Ray, we're going to get into that podcast tonight. It's very eye-opening. You know, and I know that he's gotten a lot of shit online because I guess he's, you know, I've been kind of bouncing around and listening to some of the podcasts. He's been on a podcast with several lawyers, I think. And he might have said some things and kind of backed it, you know, walked it back and then said some other things. And that's been kind of the thing about him, that he's like changing his story or whatever. My opinion on it is, if he's enough to sit up with Steve Goncalves and get the approval of the family, and Steve's an IT guy and knows this stuff really, really well, and if they've had probably multiple conversations and Steve can vet the information that Cy is giving him, I tend to believe on the side of this expert and Steve's, you know, vetting of Cy Ray, and being able to get up and sit on an hour and a half amazing podcast. I thought it was very eye-opening, the things that he found out. And I love digital forensics. I know that some people love DNA, and we'll talk a little bit about the DNA as well, too. But I love digital forensics. You know, I always say, and I've always said this, the phone will always get you in trouble if you're committing crimes. They're going to find a lot of things on there. And it was very interesting, the patterns that he found in Kohberger's phone, what he was doing to kind of allude to kind of make it like this false thing that he wasn't there, but that pattern only started over a certain period of time. And then they could look afterwards. He said he wished he could see they saw his pattern 6 months leading up, but he wished he had the data to see 6 months after to kind of see, you know, what he was doing or whatever, or months after what he was doing. So very, very interesting. But I'll just take everybody kind of up to current right now. As we saw in the video here too. So Bryan Kohberger obviously has filed a post-conviction relief petition asking the court to withdraw his 2025 guilty plea in the Idaho murders. Kohberger is now claiming actual innocence and says he was pressured into falsely admitting guilt. And one thing that I think is very interesting from that podcast, in Cy Ray talks about this, or maybe it was Steve, where they said that Ann Taylor's interactions with Kohberger were almost on a daily basis, and they found that to be very strange and really weird. And they were wondering if, you know, she was kind of, you know, grooming him in a sense when all of this falls, like, hey, I'll fall on the sword for you, and then you can get some, you know, new effective counsel and see if we can actually get this to come up to a trial. And they're going to talk about that. I'm sorry, Nan, and they're going to talk about that in the podcast. Go ahead.
Oh, no, I totally agree. I mean, it's not improper for an attorney to be visiting her client in jail every day. And maybe that was just as certain hearings were coming up, so she was coming regularly to prepare him. It's a little unusual. I don't know if there's going to be some discovery or an evidentiary hearing on whether or not she may have crossed lines. I'm not sure. But what I can say is the podcast that Brian Entin conducted and the interview of Cy Ray with the Goncalves family. And I mean, Olivia Goncalves is so smart, asks such interesting and intelligent questions. The information that's come out now makes me think, wow, is there some larger strategy that the defense is employing? Was there a plan for Ann Taylor to fall on the sword at some point, and then to pave the way through the judicial system and the appellate processes to get Kohberger in a position where has a new trial, or a conviction is overturned, or has a new trial, and then he's facing the death penalty again. And that's an important part. So if he's actually successful on this application right now, he gets a new trial, and then the death penalty is back on the table. It's like every single thing that he was looking to avoid at the end will be put back on the table for him. But I also thought this podcast is interesting because the Goncalves family give some insights about some of the dissatisfaction they had with the prosecution.
Bill Thomas. Yeah.
Thomas.
And it's wild too. I mean, we look back at this IgG DNA, and I know that you can speak a lot to this and the processes that they went to. Honestly, Nan, listening to this podcast and listen to what, Cyray and what Steve Goncalves and Olivia had to talk about this. I mean, that probably would have fucked this whole thing. I mean, the process of the way that they got it. I mean, this would have been really probably beneficial to Kohberger in the sense, but all that digital evidence as well too. So you have like kind of that counterbalance. Like, what are you going to believe more in? The actual physical DNA, the process that they got to, or that digital evidence that's going to place him at the scene. So this would have been a fucked up case if it went through. And I think now, knowing this, maybe Kohberger's like, wait a minute here, and let's do this. And I also think that he's just such a narcissist. He wants to be in the media and spoken about, knowing that these Netflix series are going forward. That I think it actually just dropped maybe today or tomorrow.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and you have books that are now being written and coming out, a lot of interviews. I think it's just like, hey, prison's not really what I thought it was going to be. So let's try to get out of prison now. I mean, sorry, it's not going to happen.
When we get to the part of the podcast where they discuss the investigative I can't even say it. I say IgG.
Yeah,
when
IgG.
they talk about it, I can give some insights, but with IgG, and they go into this really interesting discussion about the ends justify the means. Like, I actually think had certain steps not been skipped, they would have had a better, stronger, insulated case against Bryan Kohberger. And it may hinge, all of this may ultimately hinge, even at this level or at a higher appellate level, on a ruling that Judge Hippler made at the lower level court, where he basically said that the defense couldn't really ask a lot of questions about some of the steps taken to get to to go through the IgG steps. Okay. So Hippler was tying the hands of the defense in exploring IgG and really not letting them cross-examine some of the law enforcement on maybe some steps they skipped. So we're going to see as this works its way through the court system, because if this application is denied, he's going to appeal it. And at one point I wanted to mention to you, Cyray mentions a case that has ties to
Massachusetts.
And it's pending. It's been pending in the appellate courts for some time. You might Nilo or something.
Nilo,
like
I just actually looked it up the other day, and I have actually, hang on, I have an article about it really quick. I have this. Let me just share this really quick. This is something I actually want to look more into now that I know about it. So some DNA evidence is accounted for in the Boston serial rape case, prosecutors say, and this is the Nilo case. And this is something definitely. It says that he was a lawyer. Issue resolves around original snip of DNA evidence. The prosecutors linked to Nilo, a lawyer from New Jersey, who attacked five attacks on 4 women in Boston between 2007 and 2008. Nilo pled not guilty to rape, kidnapping, and assault charges being brought last year. Apparently, he was a student here, and while he was a student, what the prosecution is saying, that he committed these crimes, these acts, as he was in school down here, and then obviously graduated, went on and moved out to New Jersey and became an attorney. So this is a very interesting case too, and it kind of ties in, and we're going to hear a little bit about that in this podcast.
Yeah, we should at some point. I'm going to dig into that case just because, like me, it has ties to New Jersey and up to the Massachusetts, New England area. So I was very interested once Cyray brought it up.
Yeah. NH Dude, thanks so much for the $10. Says, match me peeps. Hi, Nan and Brian. Hello, Steve. How are you? Thanks for checking in. Let's do this. I'm really excited to go through this podcast because it was really good. All right, here we go. Brian Entin.
See you, Steve. Thank you for being here as always. And I know Olivia is going to join us in a little bit. She's dealing with the baby, but I wanted to continue this conversation.
If you need me to pause, just say pause, and you can talk.
And by the way, periodically I might go to Avatar, but I'm still here.
Sounds good.
You just had on News Nation, and I know, Steve, that you and Olivia wanted an opportunity to be able to talk to Cy about some of the information that he has, since he was a defense witness for Bryan Kohberger. I just wanted to ask one.
It's really cool that Entin's going to point this out. This kind of rarely ever happens, that something like this would come together, where you would have a defense expert talking to, you know, people that are on the prosecution side and coming forward. So this is kind of this is good. If people haven't seen this, I was really it's a really good thing. Let's see. June says $10. Thanks for the 10. June says, is the post-conviction relief the same as an appeal?
That's a great question.
Go ahead, lawyer.
Yeah, that's a great question. So the answer is no. So going back to the plea hearing, when he went through and entered the terms of his guilty plea, and the judge went into a plea colloquy with him, all those questions, did you enter this knowingly, voluntarily, etc. In exchange for his guilty plea, Bryan Kohberger waived all of his direct appeal rights. He can't challenge anything that happened leading up to that conviction that was the result of the plea, except those rights that cannot be waived. And those are Sixth Amendment rights, like the right to fair counsel of your choice, effective counsel, the right to a fair trial. Those are things that no defendant under any circumstance can ever waive. And that's the limited subject of post-conviction relief. So often, if you are, I'm assuming, June, a true crime follower, you will see a lot of times when there are these types of applications for post-conviction relief, they're often citing ineffective assistance of counsel, or you didn't get a fair trial. Those are those Sixth Amendment rights that give you post-conviction relief in it. You know, you can apply for it. Whether you get it is another story. And that's different than a direct appeal.
Thank you for explaining that. I also want to pull this up. Moo Does Drugs. Thank you so much for the $20. Says happy weekend. And I want to go back really quick to this. Vogue, I want to thank you so much. Look at this, Nan. 37-month member. I love that. She said BK's been watching too many pro burger channels. And 37-month member. Thank you for being here. That takes us back basically right around when I was covering the Idaho 4 case. But let's get back to this podcast. I'm really excited to get this started and hear more from Cy Ray.
Question before I throw it over to Steve, though, and it kind of plays off some of what you said on News Nation, Cy. You talked about Bryan Kohberger potentially being at the house before. Can you elaborate on that a little more? I mean, are you able to, and I know it's not exact, but are you able to say whether he was actually inside the house?
Yeah, so I'm gonna be a little bit more responsive on these questions and drag it out a little bit. So if I'm going on and on, stop me.
Yeah, you can do that on this. We have unlimited time, so feel free.
Thankfully.
Yeah,
and 100%. Like, I'll make myself available to the family, by the way, 24/7. Like, if you guys have follow-up questions going forward, by all means. When I heard that you guys wanted to have this conversation, I actually. It meant a lot to me, and I was like,
is that too fast for you? I just speed it up a little bit. Is that good? You can follow it? Nan, you frozen in time?
It seems a little, I'd love to ask your audience, that seemed choppy to me, but I'm not sure it's my internet or yours. Did it seem choppy to your audience?
It wasn't choppy for me.
Finally, I can talk to the victim's family, because I've spent my entire career advocating for victims' families. I've done a lot of stuff with parents of murdered children, and this is a very hard place that it started out trying to be at, and I really appreciate you guys reaching out. And anytime you have questions, I'll give you my direct number. By all means, feel free. You guys can hit me up anytime.
Thank you.
But what I want to cover on that piece is, when we start looking at the house itself, there's a couple different things we can look at. AT&T has a very specific report, and it's called LOCDBOR. And I know it sounds like a silly word. It's LOCDBOR, LOCDBOR, and it's Location Database of Record. This will include estimated latitude and longitudes, and they range from 25 meters out to 3,000, 30,000 meters, so they can get very big. Historically, there's accuracy issues.
Now, this is where I want people to focus as he's saying things, and I think you know where I'm going to go with this, Nan. As Cy is talking about things, watch Steve. He's shaking his head yes, because Steve knows all this stuff.
Yeah,
like
he's
I
in
said,
IT.
he's in IT. Yeah.
And before you start up again, Brian, like not only is he in IT and, the family is beyond invested in justice, whether there's a plea and a conviction or not, but the family has done its own research, kicked its own tires, talked to many experts. They're getting things volunteered to them. So I'm sure this is very, very familiar to Steve Goncalves.
I'm sure. And Sam Bell, thanks for so much checking in from Canada. 279 super chat. Thank you so much. All right, let's go.
This report. So if you just take all the data and you throw it on the map and you think that's accurate, you're going to have a lot of problems. A really good example in this case is there's a time when Brian goes up to Seattle and one of his loc-de-boer hits shows him in New Orleans. So that gives you an idea of the accuracy issues. Wow. There's two factors. And like I said, I'm going to pile on a lot of data for you guys. The next thing that comes into play is the actual handset, the phone itself. iPhone actually restricts a lot of third-party apps and even the mobile carrier to some points of getting precise location data, which a lot of people don't realize. If I try to ping a phone, that phone ping can actually be screwed up by Apple itself to instead of getting this nice, neat little GPS, I get this 5,000 meter GPS range, and you can be anywhere in that 5,000 meters. Samsung, on the other hand, is a very chatty phone. It's preloaded with all kinds of silly apps and ridiculous monitoring. If anybody's ever had a Samsung, when you first power that thing up, like there's 100 apps on that thing. It's good for law enforcement because when we get a phone that's a Samsung phone, it's typically very chatty on the network. We're going to see a lot more connectivity. Samsung's also unique that if I do certain things with certain apps that require location data, such as GPS or navigation, that accuracy from the 3,000 or the 5,000 meter ranges come down to 25 meters. And in this particular case, if you look at those precise measurements, there's probably 5 that land directly on what would be the living room of the house. Like the latitude, longitude is the physical house itself. And, if you put the house back on the map and you map those, the hits are inside the house. Now,
I'm going to let you keep explaining. I just want to make sure I understand correctly. So, because I haven't heard this before. So you're saying based on the data you saw, the latitude, longitude for Bryan Kohberger's Samsung was in the living room?
The AT&T derived latitude, longitude from the AT&T's network that it estimates a location, it lands in the house. And it's a 25 meter range. So, we're talking 75 feet. So it could be anywhere in the house on any floor. It could technically be outside the house. It could be on the property, but it's showing in the immediate area.
I'm going to pause here for a second. And now this goes back to my theory when I talked about the Bluetooth speaker. And I'll be honest with you, I emailed Cy Ray about this, and he's going to talk a little bit more about there's other things that put him inside the house. Now, will I ever get an answer out of him? I don't know, but I emailed him about this, and that's where I went in and I actually downloaded the evidence. The evidence list was in the files the other day, and I made a post about it, and it talks about 3 speakers that were taken and held in the evidence. And that's where I always go. Did he fuck up one time, walk up there with his Bluetooth or his Wi-Fi on and tried to handshake with these devices, and that puts him in and around that house? I'm always just very curious about if they have any type of data like that, because that's always been my theory.
Okay. I hope he does write you back because he seems really knowledgeable on these subjects.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, but he might not, because he says he knows a lot more.
I have a delay in my internet.
Do you want to go out and come back in? Okay.
I'm going to do that. Keep rolling. Okay. Yeah. I'm going to do that.
All right. Before and after, and I'm looking at all the other evidence. I think these are accurate locations. That's, and to Steve's point earlier, this is why court, I think, is so critical for this case. That's an argument to be had in front of the jury where the defense would come in and say, hey, you can't reliably say this. And the prosecution would say, here's why. When done right, I feel that they're reliable.
So when you say accurate locations, you mean you believe, based on your expertise, that he was inside the house on previous occasions?
So I'll qualify a handful of things tonight. And again, Steve, any questions that later on, by all means, hit me up. I'm more than happy to pour over anything you want to. One of the things the defense did with me early on in this case is they got outside of the geolocation data and they said, hey, as a former homicide cop, as a homicide sergeant, as a supervisor that supervises these type of investigations, we're interested in anything you can find. And they poured tons of data over. Why that's important too is it's not just the phone stuff. There's a lot of stuff inside the crime scene and things that I reviewed in the crime scene. I 100% believe that the offender, who is Bryan Kohberger, like there's no alternative theory in my head at this point. He's been in the house before. I think there's absolutely no doubt he was familiar with the basic layout of the house. I'm not saying he was intimately familiar with the entire house, but he had a working knowledge of the house. That house is laid out very weird. I've been through the house. The path that was taken, what we see is what occurred in the house, him coming and going from the neighborhood. There's prior knowledge. There's no doubt in my mind that there's prior knowledge. So that also helps support some of this. One thing I want to kind of circle back to, Brian, and Steve, you'll find this in my report. And it took me weeks to get the defense to allow me to put this in my report. They didn't want me to put it in there. There are third-party databases that collect what is called MAID ID, so mobile advertiser ID. And you guys have all experienced this where you've searched for, I don't know, a pair of shoes. You've Googled a new pair of shoes you think you wanted. And then 2 days later, you're surfing the internet and some ads are popping up for those shoes. That's based on your mobile advertiser ID. It's a unique number, but there's third-party databases that collect that. And typically when they're collecting that type of information, it gets a latitude, longitude stamp with a timestamp. So we can actually see. Law enforcement can access those databases. You have to have a search warrant. There's a process to go through. In my report, what you'll find is it's towards the very end of it. I actually lay out that, hey, there's more than reasonable suspicion here to believe that this phone has been inside the residence or very close to the residence on these dates. Typical criminal investigation, we would go look at these third-party databases, pull all the mobile advertiser ID data from those dates. Forget the 13th. His phone is off. We're never going to get his phone in or near the house on the 13th, and that's where all the focus is. But if we go back to pattern of life and we pull these other dates leading up to the crime, I feel incredibly confident that they're going to get precise GPS. Now I'm talking 3 meters. So now we're talking less than 10 feet at, around, and very close to the house on those different occasions. The idea that I put this in my report and said, this is the kind of follow-up I would expect to have, and nobody ever, I fully expected as soon as I dropped that report that January, that by February, March, we were going to see a discovery on the Snoopy gun. They didn't even look at it. They didn't even bother with it. It's incredible.
If they looked at it, they wouldn't have understood it. We heard that in court when they were talking about a JSON file and how you can edit it and how like that was some kind of weird anomaly. It's like, that's what the file's for. That's what you use it for. I mean, it was very confusing to the audience, but the lack of knowledge inside that courtroom at certain times was very frustrating to me. And, I mean, I went and hired my own people. I went Shadow Dragon. I've said it multiple times. They have OS Lint. They were like, Steve, the same emails they're using in this court case are the same emails we're tracking back to your children. But we're not doing it for free. They weren't like a Sirade. They're like, I think there was a 30K. Don't quote me on that, but I that's what my mind wants to tell me. It was like a 30K. And they said, we're not giving it up on a case this big. We keep doing, because we're highly in demand. We're not going to take a case this big and not get stiffed with the payment. We're not making that our message. But they literally said, we can literally tell you that he's been connected to these people through his fingerprint of his emails and the things that he was doing online. It's a whole science that they have out there, and touch points, and they put it all together. He was very confident, and he said they're refusing to give me any money. They want to do it for free. And to that point, the Cellbrite, the Barnharts, ended up didn't have to do it, but they did for free, just like Cyrus. So there.
Real quick, I'm just getting to the Sam Bell. Thanks for the $13.99 Canadian. Says Kohberger pled guilty to avoid the death penalty. I believe he legitimately was scared of being killed. Now he's bored in doing the LWOP and wants to be in control again. He's genius at being an idiot. I love that. And yeah, I looked up the Netflix series actually dropped on the 29th. So I actually know tonight when I get done with this, I'm going to start the Netflix series. And you all should too. All right, here we go. Nana's actually restarting her her computer at the moment. I want to thank the $20 Cash App that just came in. Appreciate that so much. All right, here we go.
It was these decisions being made, not over the right decision. It was, I don't know what it was, but evidence was being missed in a case that the world was watching, and we can do better. We can learn from our mistakes, and we can do better. And that's why we're here right now.
And, you know, Steve, if you think about it, let's push that price up to $50K. when you look at the amount of money that was spent on this investigation and bang for the buck, spend the $50K is probably the best thing you're going to spend on this case, because it's going to show that I think those concrete connections. I do have a question. I think you guys might be interested in this. I believe that the girls went to the A&W. There's a little A&W and a little store.
I know exactly. Yeah, right down the street.
I think this was a pretty routine thing that they hit on a regular basis.
I made a lot of that predictions at first too in some previous streams. You're going to hear a little bit more about it here. There was a grocery store that was mentioned, not in Albertsons, was another one that a lot of the students there go into in Pullman. And I said that this is probably where Kohberger had some contact with these kids. He probably saw them at one of these places, because you could follow all the places that they went to in the extended evidence when that was all dropped. And I started actually mapping it out. I have a map of all the places that they talked about on Google Earth. Actually, I probably can name that place, or maybe someone in the chat knows what I'm talking about. But I said, oh, well, that's probably where he came across them at first. And everybody's like, oh, no, you're crazy. The prosecution said that, you know, they never had. Hi, Nan. Is it better?
Hi.
Are you better?
It is a little better.
All right. And a lot of people said, because I mapped out where all the surveillance cameras
Am I
were.
not better? I seem better. Yes.
I said Winco. It was Winco Foods. Winco Foods. And they pulled a lot of the financial records for Kohberger there. And I said, you know, I bet you that's where he started to come in contact with them. And everybody called me crazy. They're like, oh no, but you're going to hear a little bit more about this. They think it's the A&W. So let's see. All right, let's play here.
I'm really curious to some of the background there, but one thing that I've always said is missing, and it's really bothered me. Has anybody ever approached you guys on what's called VICAP? Have you ever heard that word VICAP? Or it's basically a history of the victims to everything of where they shop. If they order pizza, where they order pizza. Has anybody ever approached you in this investigation to try to?
Closest we got to they were scared once I hired a lawyer. They just stopped talking to me. And my lawyer said,
Vogue thinks $10 says she thinks it's the coffee shop or the pool party. I tend to believe it was probably one of those places that they mention here. And I always thought it was the Winco Foods because they pulled credit card transactions from Kohberger, and I think there was some transactions of the roommates there too. I have to go back. Again, my brain's a little cloudy on this. I could be wrong. People are probably going to come after me and be like, oh, you're fucking wrong. Again, I got to go back and look at it. Vogue tends to think it's the Mad Greek as well, where Maddie and Xana worked. But we'll listen to Sai. We'll see what he says. You back? She might be glitchy. Something going on. All right, let's
well, they'll answer questions, but to the point of they're not going to be witnesses because they didn't want the gag order to fall over. I told my lawyer, I want the ability to speak on behalf of my child. If anything comes to the point where they're going to put a gag on me, then they can't talk to me. And I had nothing to hide. It was just, you're not going to control me like an asset. I'm going to speak on my daughter's behalf, or I'm going to jail, one or the other. So, yeah, we never got there. We got to the passwords. We got to usernames. They hit Olivia up. Olivia got into the cloud ID. Like, Olivia hacked. It's fake. Like, we know the passwords.
I knew my sister's password on her Apple device, but it was two-factor authentication. So it would send a code to her device, and they wouldn't. And still to this day, they've not handed over her phone because they say that they can't get into it. But regarding VICAP, and I apologize if I got that wrong. No, we've never ever heard that. We've never been familiar with that at all.
You would remember it's about almost 300 questions, and it's a deep dive in any information. And this has nothing to do with the gag order. There's no reason they wouldn't do that. The reason I'm asking is there's certain things that would come out in their normal pattern. Like, hey, if they ran to the convenience store, what convenience store would they run to? Is it kind of if they met friends or everybody was going to a place that they would converge? And we're getting back into the reliability of the GPS. So I don't want to get too far on a branch saying I know this happened, but there are multiple times that the device, Kohberger's device, is in the area of the house, and then it moves to the parking lot of that A&W root area. At the same time, multiple residents of the house go to the A&W root area. So there's times where I can actually see that, and that to me, that's what we call a collision. It's one thing to have devices in a general area, but when we see the two devices track together to a point and then track back, that's incredibly telling. So, the idea that nobody has come back to you guys and said, hey, let's talk about the A&W or some of the other friends it's just mind-blowing. So I can't agree with you enough. It needs to be changed. That's why I took this case. I'm hoping in any pain and trauma that I've caused you guys, I can.
And I actually want to see if they pulled the ANW. Let me see if there's any surveillance camera that they pulled. Let's see. And I'm going to play this while I look for that. Nan's going to log in with her phone. She's having some issues with her computer. Let me see. I'm going to play this.
I apologize. And my sincerest respect and condolences on this thing. I couldn't imagine being in your guys' situation, having to go through this. And now it coming full circle back. But at the same time, when I first looked at this case, my initial thought was this can never be the standard investigation that we see on cases. This can never be acceptable.
Thank you so much.
Brian and I were talking before you guys jumped on.
$10.
After the plea deal, I actually, against the defense, Ann was incredibly upset with me for doing this. But I've created a 1 day debrief. I've been going around the country for free, providing to law enforcement. And for you guys, hopefully this helps a little bit. We've had an incredible response from law enforcement.
And that's what Cy Ray. I mean, Cy Ray thinks that Maddie was the intended target. I mean, he feels pretty confident about it. Yeah, I always thought there's something with the Winco. They tend to think it's the A&W. I mean, they have more of the evidence in this case to look at and look over versus what we could get our hands on. So I always thought that it was the Winco, but he definitely ran into them somewhere and started tracking and following them. And it's the tracking, when we start hearing more about that, it's pretty eye-opening. I mean, it's a lot of stalking.
Service you guys got on this case, the average enforcement agency is appalled by. Since November, when I started teaching this course, we've had 300 agencies throughout the United States attended. So it's resonating. We're getting a lot of endorsement of, yes, we need to change these things. But it's really interesting to look at that and just how much fell through the cracks on this case.
So I have a quick question, and I hope that it comes across the right way. So my question is separating the murders and the burglary from the...
Did you make it back on delay?
I apologize.
It's all
yes.
Right. Do you have a storm in your area?
Yeah, we had a bad storm.
Yeah, that's definitely it. All right. Well, you're back. We're working our way through here, and pretty great information. Some things, like I said, that I haven't heard. Cy's got some pretty good evidence to lead to believe, in his opinion, that where Kohberger could have potentially first met up and saw these actual students and began his stalking. So it's really good stuff. This is a great interview. All right, let's go.
I love stalking. Yeah. And as we know, the state never picked up stalking charges, but the FBI currently still has an active investigation. Do you think that some of those things were not picked up by the state because of this separation? Or do you think that this would have been something that would not have driven a charge, or would not have been evidence of a charge that they were not actively pursuing?
I'm guessing, this is my opinion of it, things that I've seen. I'm happy sharing this opinion to whoever, but there's a lot that needs to be filled in for it to land where I say 100% this is what's happening. I'm about 90% here. They back themselves into a corner, into a no-win situation, because the problem the FBI has with stalking right now is they cannot prove stalking in the work product that they do. It'll never hold up in court. In fact, I don't think a federal prosecutor would even take the case. So that's why we haven't seen the FBI proceed with that. Does the FBI have information right now, or potentially the ability to go get information to prove that case? 100%. But the problem that they have...
Tell me what that would be.
Well, it'd be that mobile advertiser ID. It would be mapping all of the AT&T records and looking at the pattern of life of Brian over 6 months, where we see these routine travel patterns. We can see where he's going, what he's doing, how long he's stagnating there. Understanding pattern of life is everything for this case. The problem the FBI has is, to make that stalking case, they're going to have to disclose or discover new evidence that never came out from the state of Idaho. And now you have these competing cases where you have a case that allegedly went through the entire process of discovery and never produced the evidence that's needed. And now for a federal case to all of a sudden say, oh, by the way, here's this other evidence. They've painted themselves into a corner that they can't explain.
Man, is that the fuck up with the IGG? Is that what he's talking about there?
Well, that
They heavily relied on that so much, right?
Yeah, they heavily relied on the IgG, which did paint them into a corner, Brian, but also, and I probably missed it in your displaying it to your audience, but I've seen this interview in preparation for this evening. By not exploring the additional information that he frankly uncovered on the MAID, MAID. I don't remember
Right.
what the acronym is for, but like the mobile advertising.
Yeah.
He discovered all of this information, what Kohberger likes to shop for, where he likes to shop, all of this kind of fingerprint of his digital interests
Right.
that Cy Ray uncovered this. It was disclosed to the prosecution, and the prosecution never pursued it. And by not pursuing that and exploring it and seeing if there were trends and patterns in Kohberger's shopping history, likes and dislikes online, and relying so heavily on the end result, the IgG, meaning the accurate DNA identification of Kohberger, and trying to work backwards, the prosecution tied its own hands, and it has created possible constitutional challenges for Kohberger at the appellate level.
Yeah. Oh boy, they fucked this up bad, huh?
Well, I do believe, and I thought it at the time when you were the one, as I said, who informed me that he was pleading. I thought at the time Bill Thompson did not think that the case was handled properly from a prosecutorial level. He was probably pushing to just plead this out and get it over with, which I hope one day to learn more from the Goncalves family, who is the most outspoken, as to what involvement they really had in the plea process. Like, I know
They
it was
didn't
kind
have
of
any.
it was kind of shoved down their throat at the
And
11th hour.
We hear about it here in this podcast too.
Yeah, like they talk about it, but it's kind of like one of those things where you're right about to jump off the cliff with the sky glider, and you get the instructions at the last minute, and you're trusting the people around you to say, okay, this is what you do, and you pull up and you're like, oh, okay, and the wind is blowing and you go, and you hope everything's done properly. That's how I look at this. And I'm saying to myself, had they all taken a beat, including Ann Thomas, the attorney for Kohberger, and everyone just took a beat. Taylor, excuse me, I'm mixing up my.
We got a lot of T's.
I think it's Bill Thompson. There's a lot of T's.
Bill Thompson. Yeah, there's a lot of T's.
And Taylor, I also felt rushed it at the end. And that's going to create some problems too, which could feed into Brian's appeal.
Fantasy.
Because if this post-conviction relief application is denied, then he will have an appeal, going back to June's earlier question. And there are cases, as we discussed, that are going to be working their way through the court system. And there is a Supreme Court case, which they're going to discuss in Idaho, that are going to possibly make it an easier road for him to toe.
Interesting. Here we go.
Yeah, no, I get it.
I feel like there's two discoveries, because I've actually heard almost everything that you've said already, that he was in that house, even waited in certain locations for like extended periods of time of no movement. This wasn't the only house that he stopped. There was like a loop that he was following, and there was a couple other places that he basically stood still for a certain amount of time. Just telltale signs that this person wasn't shopping, and they cross-correlated to bank records and the ATMs and all that stuff. They had some stuff, the basic old school investigations they had down, but the technical was almost
terrible.
like they outsourced it to the FBI. And then when the FBI were like, we're not so sure that our discovery is your discovery or our investigation is your investigation, that there was these huge gaps in it. And when they went to go to make a case, it wasn't so clear. So as a father, I'm like, I'll fill in the gaps if I can, especially when it comes to technology. And it was an eye opener. It was so frustrating to sit there with a guy who looks like Santa Claus, who has his consciousness, his short-term memory on a piece of paper, has no clue about technology, never will. And there's 4 lives in the balance. It's just scary.
I couldn't agree with you more. And, this is a big problem with the FBI. The FBI has a habit of coming in on these cases. And where the problem happens is the FBI has access to things they can't get into court properly. They can't lay the foundation the way that state courts require. But they still proceed. The IGG, I will tell you, the investigative genetic genealogy on this case is overlooked at how impactful it was. As soon as they made the decision to go with investigative genetic genealogy, this case was doomed from a perspective, because they had to go outside of policy, they had to hide things, and now once they got the hit,
it only led back to his father, and you're going to hear about that here in this podcast. That's going to talk a lot about that. Like they relied on that IGG so much, but you just end up at his father. That's it.
Yes, and that's where they skipped steps, and they said, well, we know we can. There's guidance that says we can access his DNA. There's no statute that says we can, or at least there's guidance that says law enforcement shouldn't really do it this way, but there's no rule that you can't do it. It's like when I tell my kids, please, I just made fresh cookies, don't eat any. Well, okay, am I going to come down on them if they grab a cookie out of the cookie jar? Maybe not. So they kind of skipped steps, got the end result, at least to the father, and then made another leap and drew it to Kohberger. And I'm not sure they've discussed it yet, but Cy Ray is going to talk about, but they already had Kohberger's name and automobile information, and they just didn't properly and diligently pursue leads. Had they done that, then this wouldn't matter so much that they skipped some steps and maybe blurred some lines of appropriateness with the IGG.
Sarah says, hey, Brian is innocent in my belief. Car has to be proven to not be his. Invite Lana or Pav on.
I mean, everybody has very strong views on both sides.
Right.
And honestly,
go ahead,
I'm
Nan.
sorry, Brian.
No.
Had Kohberger not pleaded or pled, and there's no real rule for that. You can say pleaded or pled. Had he not pled guilty, and let's say trial was coming up in December, he constitutionally would be innocent. It would have been the prosecutor's constitutional responsibility to prove that he, beyond a reasonable doubt, that he is guilty. So, I mean, there are some hotly contested views on this, and this post-conviction relief application is really drawing a lot of attention to this.
And I think that they should have immediately got a buccal swab from him.
Yes.
Immediately, and that would have quelled a lot of this shit too. But for me, I mean, just hearing a lot about the digital forensics, and that's the kind of stuff that I kind of get into and a little nerdy with. I think it just puts him so much at that house and around that house. And I tend to believe what's going on in this conversation. And I know there's going to be a lot of people that disagree with me. But like I said, if you're getting Steve Goncalves' rubber stamp on this, and this is the guy that he wants to talk to and have up on a public platform podcast and kind of align himself with, I've got to tend to believe that a lot of the stuff that's being said is very, what's the word I'm looking for? I don't know.
Accurate, reliable.
Accurate. Thank you. Yeah.
And someone had asked in your chat before, I had some technological mishaps. Is it unusual for a defense expert to be talking this way or talking with the families of the victims? The answer to that is absolutely yes. Not only is it unusual for a defense expert to be revealing anything that he learned in the course of his advocacy and issuance of opinions, but also then to offer them, and as we're starting to see, in a very willing, helpful manner, to try not only to educate and provide information to the family, but also he's on a mission to help better educate law enforcement at the state and federal levels so this doesn't happen again.
Yeah. Sam Bell, thanks for the $13.99 Canadian, says, I've seen the new Netflix documentary series about the murders. All the info about the case is already all what we know, but it focuses more on the lives of Ethan, Kaylee, Xana, and Maddie. It made me cry. Thanks for the preview there. I'm looking forward to that. I'm actually going to probably start it tonight after we get off doing this. I'm going to pull one more up and then let's get back to this interview because we have a little while to go. Kelly says the problem is that many murders aren't going to have video evidence of him committing the crime. You have to put together the dots. So, I believe that, connect the dots. And I've always said that I always thought that digital forensics was going to really hurt him in this case. All right, here we go.
You can see it clear as day. The rest of the investigation is how do we hide the IGG? Because we don't ever want to talk about the way that we
go.
For me, as an old school investigator, that drives me crazy is Bryan Kohberger's vehicle and his name are setting in a report that entire time. All they had to do is follow up and get a sample of his DNA.
That's it.
If they would have done that and stopped trying to rely or over rely on this technology of the IgG produced, I think this is a completely different case. But they crossed the line with IgG. They knew they crossed the line, and everything we see after that is nothing more than a smokescreen trying to hide what actually happened to identify him.
I'll go a step further and be careful with this. I wish my lawyer was here. The IgG was done in a scripted fashion of it works. We know how it does. They told me, the people that I've been around said, if we get it tossed out, it led to the dad. It never led to BK. And that's by design. It never goes to him. It goes to his father in the trash, established the law, and then we got a warrant and we got the cheek swab. We got it down. IgG is not going to ever be in court because it's a tip, and this is established standard, and we're not going to let a little podunk Moscow make court law or state law or any kind of law. This is never going to get into a courtroom because we have these established practices, and that is what it is. And, if you call a tip on a black SUV that you've seen that has some kind of explosives in it and something, and you want to give that tip, well, that doesn't go into court either. So I get where they're going with it, and the greater good. I'm just a dad trying to make sure that my daughter in the system gets better, but I do see some red flags, and I know we had the right guy, and we just made it all difficult for everyone. We just made it so difficult for everyone because nobody knew what they were doing.
Nan, do you think that because they knew the prosecution knew that there was so much fuck up with this IgG, once Kohberger said he's going to plead guilty, it's why it got kind of rushed at the end, so there wasn't time for him to go back and go back on his plea. I changed my mind. Let's just push this thing through. Let's rush it through. Get to the final end. Now we've got him. Do you think that could have been in the back of his mind?
Yes, I do. I've had pleas where clients are, they see what they're facing ahead of them, and they, for whatever reasons that I've either discussed with them or their own personal sentiments, have decided I'm going to plead. And then once that decision is made, it's very fragile. It's like a house of cards because anything can happen to change someone's mind, whether it's your client, meaning the defendant, is talking to someone in the jail and they talk them out of it, or they see a news article and they're talked out of it. They think, well, maybe I have a chance. Hope is a very powerful and a very scary thing.
Right.
So there is always some element of rush and get it done once that decision has been made. I was listening to another podcast earlier where an attorney of 50 years was saying, sometimes you get to the plea hearing and you're like, God, I don't know. Is my client going to change his mind?
Yeah.
It's very, very fragile.
Yeah, if you're just jumping into the chat, my guest this evening is Nan Gallagher. She's an attorney out of New Jersey. We're listening here a recent podcast with Cy Ray, Steve Goncalves, Brian Entin, and Olivia Goncalves, which I love. And I've always said this, the best interviews are what? When interviews just shut up. We haven't heard Brian Entin barely once. And he's doing a good job in letting them talk and giving them this forum to let this happen. So here we go.
Yeah. Go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, I think it's difficult for people to grasp that we can stand behind his guilt, but not understand or agree with everything that the prosecution and state did.
Right.
And it
Yeah,
makes it difficult for us to be put in a position where we are having to defend the state's case that we don't fully understand. And there's a lot of missing pieces for us. And that's the only way that we can justify his guilt. So it puts us in a difficult position of being like, man, you guys are really making us fight for your work that you did, that you yourself won't stand behind. That's a conversation that we have a lot as a family.
Real quick, Willow's sister, thank you so much for checking in. I just want to recognize you. Last night we were over. I was on Mike the Young Jerks channel, and she shared, her husband had recently passed away, and it was very brave that you did that to come out. And I just want to send my condolences to you, and I'm sure that my chat will as well. So if we can uplift Window's sister, I said Willow, Window's sister, a little bit here, I would really appreciate that. And thank you for being here and hanging out with us this evening.
Yeah, I can imagine. And Steve, with what you said, I hate to put it in these terms, but it summarizes exactly what you said. The end result justifies the means, right? It doesn't matter how we get to him through IDG, because we have all of these bailout plans that we feel we can protect ourselves. Anytime law enforcement takes the idea or the process or the methodology that the end result can justify the means, we're in trouble. Because what happened with that is they created the situation, they realized how impactful it was now, and now the next 4 months of investigation is nothing more than trying to hide what they did at the beginning. And that's why we see the phone records were never analyzed, because they didn't need the phone records. The phone records for AT&T were nothing more than a smokescreen so that they could say, oh, look, we got this tip, we followed up on the phone, we found this, and oh, that led us over here. The phone records were never gathered as a true investigative tool because they already have the narrative written. And whatever aligned with that narrative because of IGG, they brought in, and anything that contradicted that narrative, they eliminated. A really good point on this is they committed in the first search warrant to Brian driving east on 270. Everything, and it repeats itself, on 50 different search warrants that he traveled east on 270. Bryan Kohberger was never on Highway 270 that night, ever. He took a route north of the airport. He actually crossed 95 north of Moscow, and then he dropped back down south on the east side of Moscow. And that's why he ends up on Indian Hills, is he actually came from the east.
Man, this case was fucked, huh? Because that IGG, Nan, they wanted to stick to that and be like, this is how we got him. So that makes a lot of sense. Like, okay, these are the things that would kind of align with IGG, but anything that would kind of dispel that, will pull that out. But that stuff ended up being the most critical evidence that would have nailed him. This case was fucked.
I agree. And, we didn't see it at the time, right? So go back real time. I remember you and I communicating like, man, he's so screwed. He's definitely guilty. And as it was gearing up for trial, but I always had a hesitation with the issue of the investigative genetic genealogy because it
became
was
a big issue. Yep.
It was just like you leapt over a bunch of other things. And once Hippler kind of bought into the argument, and I don't know if the argument was actually raised by the prosecution or Othram Labs, but when the argument that it's just a tip, and once you use it as a tip, then you pursue your investigative measures around that tip. Well, they didn't then give 100% attention to phone records and digital records. And by skipping those very pivotal steps, those are steps that could have insulated this case from being officially retried. Because if they had all the digital data that clearly showed what happened, if they did pursue that whatever the marketing and advertising information, if they really did plot out his coordinates properly instead of just in a lazy fashion, and I don't like using the word lazy, but it's just kind of like, well, we've already got the IGG. So they were a little bit resting on their laurels with, well, we have the guy and we used IGG as a tip. And because of that, if on the off chance Kohberger pursues the right mixture of appeal steps and the right judges buy into the right arguments that he and his future attorney or attorneys make, he may end up getting a conviction completely overturned. He could end up walking free. That's a frightening thought.
A question here for Nan from Let. He says, can Ann ever come out and talk publicly about the case in PK?
So the short answer is it depends. So an attorney really cannot come out publicly and start to discuss things that she either learned in confidence under a privileged attorney-client communication relationship, which this was. But if Kohberger, who seems to be presenting an argument that he had ineffective assistance of counsel on some key limited issues related to what was involved in the plea, whether or not he actually had to admit to guilt, which he did multiple times, the conditions of the prison, if he had been on death row. If he's going to bring into issue some of the aspects of their professional relationship, she can come forward. She's going to likely have to, if she needs to defend herself at a hearing in the future, an evidentiary hearing, to really go over what she did present to him and in front of his family, because he's made his family part of this. He's identified them as witnesses. So the short answer is it depends. I imagine at some point she'll write a book, and that will really be when he has exhausted his appeals.
every option. Yeah.
And that could be a decade away.
That's when things tend to roll out, and we saw that a lot with like the OJ case. All the lawyers started writing books after they knew everything was exhausted.
He did that because he's smart enough to know about the cameras. What drove me crazy in this case is when you see him go back in. By the way, the reason he went south is he panicked. Dylan saw him. He saw Dylan. Reasonable minds would say 911 is being called. And you can see in the video when he leaves, he's leaving in a hurry. If he drives back that same route, he's driving towards where Moscow PD is responding from. He's going to go right back towards the police department. So he has to go down south. When you look at 6 months worth of his records, he doesn't have activity down south. He doesn't know 95 south of Moscow. So he gets about 12, 13 miles outside of Moscow. He pulls over. There's a good gap there, which has always been a concern to me, where he sits there for probably 10 minutes. He powers his phone back on. He goes into navigation mode, and we see the route back.
It's crazy dark too. So the audience might not know what it's like out here in Idaho. You get out in that farm community, there's no lights. We don't have. It's dark as anything. Your headlights are all you have, and high grass. So it gets. If you're not prepared for that, you're not going to be able to figure out where you're going. And without a phone, if that's your primary source of navigation, you're driving around like an idiot, for a certain amount of time.
Well, then, like I said, we've got 6 months of records. I've got a mapping system. I can put everything in there. I can hit a play button, and I can watch his phone for 6 months going around the map. What you see that morning of him coming back to Pullman.
I would love to see that.
Yeah.
I mean, I'd love to see that program work. That's pretty cool.
And that's the thing. It's like you were saying before, the phones will get you every time. And I've spoken with a good friend about this too. It's like, sometimes you get annoyed with someone and you're like, in a weird world, what if I ever did something about it?
Right.
And, which I would never, just to be clear. But like, then you say to yourself, the phone will get you every time. And it's not just when you use it, it's like when you turn it off. And the pattern of how you've used it 6 months before a crime and 6 months after. So, I mean, this is where Cy Ray, whatever people think of him, like his insight is very, very useful to kind of look at how law enforcement is supposed to study these types of trends and patterns.
I agree. All right, let's go.
You never see in the prior 5 months of records. That's the first time he's ever done that route. And then within 48 hours, he's doing the exact same route again. And that's the last time you'll see him do that. You give me the layest of lay jurors, I can connect the dots there to have them see exactly what's happening. And right after he completes that route, he goes down to Lewiston, right down to the Snake River. He's there for less than a minute or two, and then he's right back to Pullman. Like, what's happening? Of course we know what's happening. I'm with you guys on the frustration. My apologies. Like, you guys should never have been in that situation. This is an FBI issue, and I'll frame this piece. I don't put this out publicly very often. When the plea deal was reached, I contacted the FBI CAS team, and I actually told them, hey, I did a lot of the investigation here. I know what the cross-examination that you guys were going to be subjected to looks like. You name your place, I'll fly to you anywhere in the country, and I will give you the full debrief of what I saw on my side and how we could get better. They never returned my call. So, even reaching out saying, I'll give you as much insight from the defense perspective of this to be better prepared next time, they're just not interested. And the other thing that I will tell you guys just drove me crazy. Now that my report's out, your guys' last name is all over that report because I did an inventory. I put in, hey, here's what the phones were provided. And then I listed the phones by last names. The only last names in my report that were redacted are the FBI agents that worked on this case. So all of the victims' last names are in this report that went out to the public with the last 4 digits of their phone, but the FBI agents get their last name redacted? Like, what is that? That is
It's
insane.
been happening a lot. It's really,
if you off record, if you ever want to know about some of the worst, we'll let you know, but I won't propagate them here publicly.
I just want to go back for a second to something you said, Sai. So with the A&W, which is that gas station right down the road from.
And real quick, Nan, I just want to show this on the map because I actually mapped out all of this. I did a pretty extensive map out of all the surveillance cameras at one point to kind of show where he was. And I want to kind of show that area that Sai was just talking about. This is the Snake River. And these were 2 areas down here, the Albertsons, that they know that they have surveillance camera of him, I think just 24 hours after. And then he hit this Costco too. Here's Snake River. This is what he's talking about. When he went down to that area that night, well, what is he doing there? He's dumping evidence. I mean, obviously, it's pretty clear that that's probably what he was doing. Just like you said, we all know what he was doing there. So I kind of mapped all this out. His all the cameras or financial transactions that were all mentioned through the evidence. And this map is actually kind of cool to go back and look at it. And I put a lot of time and work into it.
It is really cool.
Yeah. I mapped out everything.
That's, I'm looking at this and I'm thinking 2 things. One, I wish as part of the plea agreement and the plea colloquy, the whole deal, I wish that they had required him to confess and provide details, including as to after the crime. What did you do after you left? Where did you drop and discard evidence? The other thing I think about when I saw that map is I'm wondering if there are kind of fringe true crime individuals out there who search the Snake River and the shores of the Snake River and the currents to see if they can discover anything that he may have discarded, or to even study the current patterns to see where things could wash up.
I mean, I see like YouTubers and things on Facebook where people go out and they call it magnet fishing. I would love someone to go out there with a magnet and just throw a magnet around and see if they can come up with anything or, other things, items that he may have brought or dumped.
I agree.
Yeah, I mean, I still think that knife is somewhere in the snake.
I think it is too.
Meredith checking in. How are you, Meredith? Thank you for becoming a new YouTube member. I appreciate your membership. Hope you're well. And I know that you're currently in a move, and I think that's great. So,
yeah. You're witnessing my technological failures today. I had to log in by phone. Hope all is well with you.
Yeah, here we go.
So you're saying you mapped his phone and also was it the victim's phones at the same time there?
Correct. And there's movement where they're all in the area of the house before that. And then you see it pop up over by the A&W, but they're together. They're at least mapping, and they're mapping not the exact same lat longs. They're just slightly off, but they're within meters of each other, which is, for me, that's a tall tale sign that we're getting better accuracy, because sometimes the system will default if there's a problem with the system and everybody will get the same lat long ping for like a 5,000 meter radius, but all of the lat longs are identical. In this case, they're just slightly different. They're just a couple meters apart, and it's a pattern. It happens multiple times. There's also an incident, and it was the second, I'm going to screw these dates up, but I can give them to you guys later if it's important. It was the first weekend after school started, and I believe it was Kaylee and Maddie went to Pullman, and I believe there was some type of a sorority, maybe fraternity party.
He was there.
And it's in the apartment complex right next to Bryan Kohberger's apartment. And at one point, Bryan Kohberger's phone moves over to that apartment complex as well. And that's rare. He doesn't typically hang out in that complex. But this is all the way going back in August, that first weekend after school started.
And I don't know if that's like the alleged pool party, because we kind of heard about that in some of the other documentaries. So I wonder if that lines up with that pool party. I mean, there's enough conversation and evidence here that I see that at some point their paths crossed, and he got eyes on these girls, or one of these girls at some point, and got very curious about them and started following them. I mean, it's pretty clear in my opinion.
Well, and this is why we have to remember that Ray, whatever people think of him, he's looking at the data that the prosecution does not seem to have fully studied. So he's looking at it all. Like he was just saying, it's not typically where Bryan Kohberger would go, but he's now looked, and there was this party and the girls were at the party. There was a quote unquote collision of their digital devices, so to speak, meaning in the same general vicinity. That also happened at or near the A&W, near 1122 King Road. So thinking about all of that, he's plotting out, without the IGG, the map towards conviction. And it's very fascinating to me that he's doing that, because it's really the pathway that, in my opinion, this is mine, the prosecution should have followed. And I'm not seeing things get revealed that are showing me that the prosecution was doing that. They seem a little bit over their head.
And Mo brings like a good point too. And again, I forgot a lot of stuff because I haven't really dived into this in a long time. But Mo says Xana's sister went to his school. It's very possible that they were there. They went to a party over there and he saw them. And then someone else actually agreed. Kingston said, yeah, Mo, I was just thinking about that. So that makes a good point too. Yeah. Love the chat tonight. You guys are awesome. All right, here we go.
Phones intersect in Pullman.
Yeah, the prosecution was doing the exact same thing. They were trying to take his phone activity and cross-correlate it with the other people in the family. They wanted to know who was in the house at a certain time because they wanted to plan the route to who was in there, because they were trying to figure out who was the after. And Olivia can tell you the exact day that Kaylee moved in there. I think you said it was like May.
Yeah, into the King Road house. She did move in May.
Yeah, so other people speculated there was no one in the house, or only Maddie was in the house. We've never tried to play the blame game. We don't care about that. Who's to blame is BK, and we're holding him accountable. None of the victims. Like, another thing I appreciate you saying is no cleanup. We've really chased that down, because I mean they're literally driving these young girls to the point of they don't have a life anymore. So you're not true crime anymore. You're speculation, Hollywood fan fiction crap. And I would love for true crime to get back on focus and say, how do we make the world a better place? How do we make sure that people are coming together to actually have less murders and mass murders every single year? That's something we should work towards, not this.
So here's the only problem with that, Linz. So you say, I can't accept that he acted alone. He's in prison right now. Why would he not come out and say, you know what, XYZ helped me? And that gives him a better deal of maybe getting out of prison. He works with the state. They turn someone in, and, it lightens his sentence. You got to start thinking about that stuff. He pled guilty. And if there was someone else that was involved and he knows he's going to jail for the rest of his life, why would he not at that very moment come out and say, hey, Bill helped me, or Tom helped me, or Mary helped me, or Dylan helped me, whatever it may be. Am I right about that, Nan? Am I crazy to say that?
No, you are. I mean, honestly, when Kohberger said at the time he was apprehended, I guess it happened in Pennsylvania where he said it, but he said, was anyone else arrested, or whatever he said? Did you guys capture anyone else? And that always made news reporting outfits very concerned. Like, what is that about? Is that a red herring? Is he just making that up? Are we not looking for the right suspects? But at the time of him considering a plea is when he should have offered, if he had assistance or knowledge about someone else.
Yeah, you would start spilling, I think, at the point when you're going to prison for the rest of your life.
Yes.
You probably would start spilling your guts and saying, these people are involved too. And then they would, they'd have to obviously investigate that. So no, it's a good point to bring up. But if you're in a situation where your back's up against the wall, you have no other no other way to get out of something, and you know that someone else is involved and helped you, you're squealing 100% of the time. You're squealing because it could lighten your sentence, and you could say, actually, I was just the driver, but they were the killer. And then that might, I don't know, by Idaho law, you'd have to look at that, but it might, they might say, okay, this is the person we really want, the person that killed them, and your sentence might be 40 years, but they get life, and you might have a chance of actually getting out at fucking 80 years old. So,
and some criminal defense attorneys do not want to know if their client actually did the crime. Some of them will say, don't tell me. I don't want to know. We're not discussing it. If you're telling me you're pleading not guilty, you're pleading not guilty. There would even have been a way for Ann Taylor to navigate through this very scenario with Kohberger if he never told her along the way that he committed this crime. She could have said, and maybe she did, say to him, I don't want to know if you did this. You're pleading guilty. And he didn't actually enter a plea of not guilty. He entered I don't remember what it's called in Idaho, but where she entered it for him. And it has a specific term, maybe the chat remembers, but he didn't say not guilty.
Right.
It was like a no answer or whatever so she could have said, you're not going to, you're not telling me that you did this or not, but if you happen to have knowledge about someone else who does know or has some information, now would be the time for you to tell me, Brian. And it doesn't seem like that happened.
Yeah, he stood silent. That's what it was. He stood silent. AZ got it. Yeah, he stood silent. AZ's been around for a long time. Thank you, AZ. I appreciate
I'm a little rusty on
fan
this,
fiction
AZ.
stuff. So that's part of the reason why we're here today. This is why we've been so dedicated. That's why we made a charity. This is why we have murder.
No, they call it an Idaho. It's not no contest. It was just he stood silent. He stood in silence or something like that. Yeah.
Strange.
We're doing everything in these girls and these victims' names, Ethan as well, and make sure that the world's a better place. Really, it's just the world's a better place when this is said and done.
Yeah.
You said no cleanup, Ty. I mean, right? That you think
he was in and out. We're talking minutes, and I'm limited on some of this information. There was some reenactments that I know were done, and the reenactments, this crime could clearly be carried out by a single individual, and it's 5 to 6 minutes. And if push ever came to shove and that had to be proven in court, I know there's video out there of the reenactments. Like, there is no doubt that this is a single offender. But on that point, and I think what you guys are hitting at, it's frustrating to see.
Something you're going to find very interesting in this, if you haven't seen it, and this is a good point, because a lot of people argue like, oh, well, he couldn't make that many stab wounds in this amount of time. Oh, really? Someone actually found video of Bryan Kohberger boxing, and within 3 minutes, I think he had, 180 punches within those 3 minutes. And they said that one of the victims was stabbed about 130 times. So he actually could have done this. And you'll hear a little bit more here. I don't want to kind of spoil this, but it's coming up pretty soon.
Turvey wants to say that there's cleanup because of things that are absent. Basically, there's things that aren't in a bathroom, therefore it's indicative of cleanup. There's no evidence of what that bathroom looked like before or after. Like, if we start building a case on that type of speculation, Bryan Kohberger's going to walk, right? That's just absurd. And I felt a deep obligation to call Turvey out. And, I'm going to piece something together for you guys. And I've been on the fence if I should voice this, but I think it's the right thing to do. So if I get in trouble later on, so be it. Don't get caught up in what I believe is a very rehearsed scam that is happening right now. If you look at what's happened over the last 3 months, let me help you guys connect some dots. Brett Turvey gets with Whitcomb, who's another idiot. Like, the guy who's never investigated a homicide is going to be the armchair quarterback that's going to change this thing, right? So Turvey and Whitcomb partner up. Turvey becomes very outspoken about this. And what does Ann Taylor do? She publicly reprimands him and issues this cease and desist. If you think about what Turvey's saying Bryan Kohberger is innocent, that this is a big conspiracy, that there's other people. I mean, he goes as far as saying Dylan is potentially, how absolutely absurd. Yet Ann Taylor reprimands him from proclaiming BK's innocence. I come out with a book. I go around to law enforcement. Ann knows. I told her I was going to go teach law enforcement. I have been very, very clear. I've always thought Bryan Kohberger is guilty. I think in 10 out of 10 courts in America convict this kid. Every single time we go to court, he gets convicted. The question is, does all the evidence come in because of some of the ways that the evidence was managed, which is a whole different conversation. But I am very outspoken that Bryan Kohberger is the guy. Why hasn't Ann issued a letter to me about breaching my NDA or all this stuff? I will argue any day of the week. What I am saying is way more detrimental to the defense's case than what Brian Turvey said, or Brian Turvey. And she did the one with Turvey. If you guys look at the picture, and here's the critical dates, the Thursday before the plea deal, Ann says in open court, Your Honor, I can't effectively represent my client if I don't get the continuation. So you have the primary attorney on this case saying in open court, it's one of the last statements she made before the plea deal, I cannot effectively represent my client. Those are not small words for an attorney to say in open court. And then
I would have allowed him.
72 hours later, we have a plea deal. And the way the plea deal came down, the way you guys were notified is disgusting. I've never seen that in 30 years. Like that, there's all kinds of craziness going on there.
We just learned that his family was there at the plea deal. His family was there. So they learned before we did. That's the disrespect.
What are you getting at, though, Si? If you can just connect the pieces of what you're trying to say a little more. I'm just trying to follow.
We have the ineffective counsel claim. We have the plea deal gets worked out within 72 hours. And Taylor stays on as Kohberger's attorney. Like this last year, she's the only person on the jail logs that was visiting him on a regular basis. He hasn't sought out new counsel. She's very much in his ear on a daily basis. We then see the Turvey Whitcomb book come out where, hey, there's all this conspiracy. Ann has to separate herself from that and says, oh, I don't agree with this. I'm going to reprimand you guys. Like, don't say these things. And now we see Brian drop. And I knew the appeal was coming. In my book that I sent to the publisher in February, which is a manual, it's not a Bryan Kohberger tell-all, I put it in the book. Like, the appeal is coming. There's no doubt about it.
You called it before it happened.
And what I'm convinced about is Turvey and Ann are together on this. Turvey and Ann are not at odds. Ann needed some new information because that's the only way an ineffective counsel gets any legs at all. They need something new to get spun up. They need it to be very well known. And now there has to be the separation where Ann is helping Brian, but not directly involved. And who takes that role is Turvey. So Turvey comes out, says all this nonsense. Brian writes his thing. The last missing piece, and mark my words, I think we're going to see it in the next 60 to 90 days. Ann will absolutely fall on her sword for BK. She is a true believer. She believes he's innocent. She has an unhealthy relationship with him. And I think we're going to see Ann come out in the next like 60 to 90 days, maybe a little bit longer, depending on the timeline. And she's going to eat the ineffective counsel. She's going to say, he's right. I missed it. I should have known about it.
Big break moment. I just looked at it with a new lens, with this new thing. Yeah. I'm going to go even further. I'm going to let some stuff out of the bag. So I've talked to some authors, and so they actually have footage of BK boxing. He's an amateur boxer. They have a whole thing of him in a ring, 3 minutes, 162 punches, 160. That was going to be like, oh, he couldn't do 150 in 12 minutes. Now they have him in 3 minutes throwing blows of 162 times. So there was more than enough time. There was actually more time for you to go in and maneuver and do things, change clothes, whatever you did. There was time there, and they were going to show him physically doing it against another human being that was willing to fight him. And these people are sleeping in bed. They had a really good plan. Some parts they were going to execute really well. Other parts they didn't execute as well. But to anyone who thinks that somebody could go in there, they didn't have enough time, you don't know your facts. They were going to show you to your face.
Go ahead, Nan. It looks like you wanted to jump in and say some stuff here. Am I right on that? Or?
Yeah. Well, first to start with the question, which I cannot read on the small print.
Sure.
On my phone,
so Granny says, can Ann still represent him?
Yeah. No, she cannot. Once the defendant, who's now been convicted, has claimed ineffective assistance of counsel, there's an adversarial relationship between the two of them. Whether it's authentic or not, she cannot represent him anymore. That does not mean that she will not be called to court to answer some questions about the nature of the plea, the circumstances leading up to it, the information conveyed to him and to the family, which led to the plea. But no, she cannot represent him. So technically he's indigent. I think he's made a request for a public defender, but there will be somebody is going to step in, or someone will be assigned to represent him. But the other part of what I wanted to comment on is this is the part of this podcast where I feel that Cy Ray is kind of going well beyond spilling the tea post expert advocacy. He's now saying, mark my words, in 60 to 90 days, she's going to fall on the sword. She got kind of uncomfortably too close to the defendant. She's a true believer in his innocence. These are really serious allegations for a defense expert or a former defense expert to raise against defense counsel. This is where I got a little uncomfortable the first time I heard it, because I do pick up a lot of what he's putting down in terms of avenues not pursued investigatively. But this is where he's kind of adding a little bit more of his own opinion and, for lack of a better word, some drama to it all, which I don't necessarily think helps Kohberger or the victims' families, because this is wild speculation. I'm not saying he's wrong. It's just well beyond the purview of his level of expertise. He's not an expert on reading people or on, defense prosecution practices. So he just kind of, he lost me a little bit here.
Could he be dropping some of this because he's got some, seminars coming up, or to buy his book, and,
Yes.
he's in front of probably one of the best reporters right now on his podcast with the Goncalves family. So like you said, maybe, look, drama sells, fucking drama sells. We know it very well.
Oh, I don't know what you're talking about, Brian, but you're right. Drama sells. Didn't he just say a few minutes ago that he essentially submitted his quote unquote manual to the publisher in February?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So he's kind of teetering on some ethical boundaries that I don't necessarily know if I agree with. I would have, as much as I think he knows his stuff, I would have a difficult time retaining him as a defense attorney. I don't know if I would retain him in the future, regardless of his expertise, because he's now kind of going above and
Crossing
beyond
the line a little bit. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Harper says, great coverage, Brian. Thanks again. Thanks for the 5. I appreciate it. We got one more super chat to make the goal. Maybe we can make it happen here. But he even says it too. He goes, I'm just going to fucking say it. Maybe I'm going to get in trouble later. I don't really care at this point, but all right, here we go.
Yeah, it's kind of like striking the match, Brian, and throwing it behind you, letting it burn.
Gasoline burn. Yeah.
So you would know, I guess you were on the inside, that Ann Taylor actually believes he's innocent and has an unhealthy relationship with him?
I am concerned about the ongoing communication, the protection, just that I don't know how else to explain it, almost as like a motherly instinct with Brian. To Steve's point, 100%. The Kohberger family was way more involved on that plea deal than the victims' families ever were. I believe that there was conversations going from the jail in real time of this thing going down. There's no doubt about that. But I've done a lot of these cases. I've done a lot of death penalty cases. It is very unusual for the defense attorney on the case, especially one who's technically a public defender, to stay involved and active with the defendant in prison visitations the year following a plea deal. That is incredibly rare. Like the case is done. No one is in contact with him. So the idea that it's all Ann and only Ann, and he hasn't obtained a new attorney for this appeal, to me is very telling. I think jail logs and jail calls would really expose a regular routine between Ann and Brian that they're visiting and talking on a weekly, if not daily basis at times, which is weird. Yeah, that's unhealthy in my opinion. As a criminal defense attorney, you got to keep that line between your clients, right?
Lindsay, thanks so much for making the goal with a 1099. Says, I retract. I never knew that. Thank you so much for making the goal. I appreciate that. Maybe we'll start a little small one here. A little while to go here. Nan's got, she said she'll stay until 9, which is great. I think we're going to get through this pod. Great pod so far. I appreciate everybody being here and supporting. It's nice to see some of the Kohberger crew come back when I was covering this case. And I definitely want to start really diving into the case file. I think there's some things there in that we can go through. And I don't think that these conversations are over. You're going to hear more of them, I think, over the next 30, 60, 90 days leading up to, a possible appeal. But I think, honestly, when we get in front of Judge Hippler, he's just going to shut it down. Look, you pled guilty. That's it. Sorry, buddy, you're in prison and have a nice life. And then I think after something like that, you're never going to hear from Bryan Kohberger ever again.
I agree.
That could be it. Chris, thanks so much for gifting 5 memberships. Welcome in new members. and thank Chris for your memberships. Thank you. Appreciate you. Here we go, Nan.
Yeah, I was told by insiders that it's a small community we live in that said she's purposely after you, Steve. She's watching your interviews, making us all watch it together and coming up with discovery based off your conversations. And once I learned that, guess what? I started talking about Bluetooth. I started talking about other things and just put her on rabbit trails just to play chess with her. But
Okay.
I've heard some really unnatural things are going on in this case.
Is there evidence? I'll save Steve for a minute. On Olivia's cue.
This is an important part right here. What Brian Entin's going to say. I think he's going to say, "Is there any other evidence that leads to say Kohberger was inside that house?" And I think this is it. And I could be wrong, but if my instinct is here when I listen to this pod,
Is there? I'm just joking. Is there evidence, Cy, that we don't know about that was never public?
I think there's definitely stuff that has been withheld and has still been withheld. I don't know how much it was conveyed to the victims' families, universally, not just Steve and Olivia, but across the board. There's some really disturbing things on his internet history that I don't know ever really came out that would be incredibly hard to just simply show and walk away from a jury not thinking that's going to leave a big impact, especially on the case of this nature. I'm talking right now specifically his porn history. He's got a very disturbing porn history that I think really paints a picture.
And that's all non-consensual acts. And I also heard gay, male to male gay. Is that accurate?
I don't know on the gay stuff. And quite honestly, I don't mean this in the way it's going to sound. I'm not focused on the gay porn. For me,
I know what you're focused on.
For me, you hit it on the head, Olivia. The non-consensual, violent nature of the porn.
I was aware of terms drugged, raped, passed out, sleeping.
I would go more on incredibly violent sexual encounters. So not the sleeping or passed out, but very aware of what's happening and it being very, very violent. Which is always a tough thing for a defense attorney to get through. That's something that's going to really tell a story about somebody's character. I think,
Nan, I want to hear, is any Bluetooth evidence? I just want to hear it. I
know
feel
you
like
do.
I just feel there's more there to that. And I hope that someday it comes out. Wi-Fi or Bluetooth, I really feel like his phone tapped one of those speakers. Why did they hold those speakers? Why were they in evidence for so long? There's got to be some type of connection there. There's got to be.
I think there was, but also just a quick comment on the porn piece of this that
brutal
that he was referencing. I'm not certain that would have made its way into the trial. I'm not saying it shouldn't. What I'm saying is, just because a defendant has a very disturbing porn history of the likes of which was described by Olivia and or Cy Ray. And he even said it. He said, that's really bad evidence of character. Normally you don't get to bring character evidence into court to kind of say, look at his porn history. He's a bad guy. Therefore, he committed these red rums. It doesn't work that way. There's rules of evidence that prevent lawyers from doing that because it can be prejudicial. I'm just mentioning it to your audience that if Kohberger does ultimately end up getting a new trial in the future, I don't necessarily know if the porn history will come in.
But
especially,
go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say,
go ahead. I'm sorry.
People don't realize, we talk all the time, so we kind of finish each other's sentences and interrupt them. But just also because Kohberger is there's no aspect necessarily on its face that was sexual of this crime, even though, I know it's Gary Bricotto, a very renowned psychologist, feels that these were sexually motivated crimes. At least what is trending towards predominantly his primary intended victim may have been Madison Mogen. And maybe there was a sexual piece to that crime. And then he was surprised that Kaylee Goncalves was there. And then Xana interrupted and he wasn't expecting to see Dylan Mortensen, all of the above, and where Ethan fell into that timeline, etc. But even though it appears that psychologists with great reputations are saying this was sexually motivated, it doesn't bring this necessarily into the pornography realm, to use prior porn history as evidence of bad character and therefore evidence of guilt.
I'm going to throw a but in there.
Yeah.
But what if all of this activity is still going on at the time that he's having all this other activity, the stalking, the alleged stalking? We can't say they didn't really prove that, or the alleged stalking, and then leading up to the murders, and he has all of this very violent porn connection or what he's doing. Does that show some type of pattern? Can they then use that and say, look, this is what he was searching. These are the things that were coming up in his search. This is the things that he was viewing. Does that add into it?
Yes.
Would that come in? Would the defense fight to get that out?
Yeah, that's a good argument that you're making. That is where the decision to allow pornography into a potential future trial will boil down to motion practice. The defense would vigorously fight to keep it out. The prosecution will look at concurrent use of pornography sites and other pornography, whether there were trips to porn shops, purchases, etc. The prosecution will have to argue that it's relevant due to the contemporaneous nature of when those purchases or views were made. But ultimately, there's no clear-cut answer as to whether it comes in. But you're making a good argument that it should.
Yeah. Should have been a lawyer, right?
Yeah.
Lynn's is asking, is this whole situation, do we think this whole situation is to just get some attention and bring some attention? I think probably, and I think the timing of it is very strange, knowing what just dropped, a couple of days ago, a new Netflix documentary. And then all this comes up just around the time of this documentary coming out. Because believe me, people are spilling stuff to him. Yo, there's a documentary that's coming out. Did you know there's going to be a documentary about, your situation or whatever? So I think that's some of that too, to get relevant in the news. Go ahead, Nan.
Two things. One, I think it is attention seeking. Yes, there's part of that. And I do feel that people who commit mass murders inherently want to seek attention. It's a part of the personality. Two, the time period, I believe, within which he can exhaust filing this type of application is September. So here we are, August 1st. So I don't know if it's to seek attention. He's kind of preserving his rights because he only has another month to file this type of application in this for these reasons under this timeline. But also, if he's filing this application now, it could have something to do with the Netflix documentary that's dropped or about to drop. Maybe honestly, I look at this and I say, maybe he's just so goddamn miserable in jail. And, be careful what you wish for, Brian, because,
you want to be in jail.
It is my view. I feel that he is, technically under the law, he is guilty, but it is my view that he actually is rightfully guilty.
Yeah.
And I do think that if he gets what he's asking for and he gets a new trial, the removal of the death penalty off of the table happens. So that's going to get undone. And he may end up on death row. And for anyone who doesn't understand what prison is like, death row versus plain regular prison for life, death row is a horrible thing. So I'm just happy he's miserable.
Well, how about this? Don't fucking murder 4 innocent people, and then you won't have to go sit in prison. Anyway, here we go.
There's stuff to still come out. I think you guys are going down the right road. I've quietly been watching, waiting for more to drop. I can tell you, for me, the location information and the pattern of life, it hasn't come out because I don't think they ever looked at it. And it is by far the most telling of what we have out there. By the way, the day after this, he turns the phone off again. So, again, they're trying to show these patterns, and they do a pretty good job of showing, hey, prior to the murders, he turns his phone off on this days, but it's like they just stopped on November 13th. And as an investigator who's looking at a lot of crimes like this, I want to see what he's doing the next week, the next 2 weeks, the next month. That is a really critical period too, that we see very defined behaviors of suspects like this. And the very next day, he heads to Moscow, he turns his phone off, he turns it back on, and he's southbound on I-95. It's almost a mirror of what you saw the day before.
The Barnhart said that they found a config file that they had to reproduce, and luckily they had the exact same phone. But basically, he went through a pattern. He turned off the Wi-Fi. Then I'm going to mess this up, but he turned off the Wi-Fi, like airplane mode, then put VPN, and then put VPN to only establish connections after start. And he did this whole thing, and that was brand new. He hadn't done that in the config files. That was the first time he did it, and they're going to bring that forward to say that this is a new behavior, just same thing that you're saying, a new behavior that he did before and after, and he doesn't do it again. He like stops coming back to the Moscow area after the murders. He doesn't go back there anymore. So anybody who thinks he's over there just shopping, they're like, and I guess the message really is to the world is you can't commit these crimes anymore and get away with it. And that's really what I'm trying.
So I'm going to just kind of address this. Okay. And I know Lana's name comes up a lot in this, and I know that she did a lot of work on this case as well, too. I'm going to be really honest with you. Her opinion and my opinion are going to gravely and grossly be so far apart. Okay. Lana does her thing on her channel. She's been in my chat before. I don't have any issues, you know, whatever. She has her opinion. I have my opinion. And I know that people are just constantly bringing this up. I'm going to tell you, I have my opinion. I think that Bryan Kohberger is the guy. There's enough evidence there for me to believe what I have tracked and what has been shown to me and what I've gone through, that he is the guy. I mean, he pled guilty. I mean, he pled guilty. You can sit here and argue it all day long. He admitted to the crime. I mean, that's fact. It's written on a piece of paper. It's black and white. All due respect to Lana. She has her opinion. I have mine. You're just never going to convince me or change my mind. That's it. You know, and great. If she has a different opinion and led her down some different roads, I think that's great. She should have her opinion, but that's how I feel. I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, the only thing I would add to that is I enjoy watching Lana's channel, and I don't think I've heard Pav speak or Birdie, but I will say that's what makes true crime communities tick, you know, looking at things from all different angles. It doesn't mean one group of opinions is worse or better than others. And I know Brian feels as I feel, and I'm not a content creator. Get all of your information, you know, reach all of your conclusions, but one's opinions don't have to necessarily align with others. You know, I can like and respect Lana very much, and then disagree with some of her opinions. And I know I do on another case, on some key aspects, but that just means, in my view, I respect her more because we do agree to disagree on things, you know, and everybody's welcome, you know, and all opinions do matter, but it doesn't necessarily mean that all opinions have to align.
Yeah, I have nothing against her. I mean, she does her thing. I do mine. My tracking of the case over the 2 years that I did it on my channel, there's just a lot of evidence there that just leads me to believe that this is a guy. And I mean, he pled guilty. I mean, that you can never get rid of that. I mean, he pled guilty to it. So anyway, here we go.
I just learned recently with the labs I'm working with, I can't say this on regular TV. Rapes are getting very, very rare. People don't get away with rape anymore because there's the fluid exchange, and that's leading. Everyone's starting to learn. If I do this, I'm going to get caught, and we need that same message in these murder cases. And I don't know how to say that in a mainstream media format, but we got to. I'm trying to
tank your podcast, Brian Entin.
What'd you say, Olivia?
So we're just going to tank your podcast instead. My apologies.
No, it's okay. It's okay.
So on that,
no, keep talking.
Steve and Olivia, let me give you a name. Follow this case. I think
Nilo.
it's really, really important.
Here it is.
The name is Matthew Nilo, Nilo. So Nilo.
Okay.
Matthew is an attorney who was practicing in New York, but he went to law school in Boston. And in the early 2000s, when he was in law school in Boston, he was a serial rapist. And I want to say he had 7 victims that they've identified. About 2 years ago, maybe 3. Man, time's flying right now. Maybe a little bit longer. Just after these murders, they did the exact same thing. It's the exact same team with IgG. And they took some of the DNA from one of those rapes. They ran it through IgG. And like I said, it's the same team that worked on the Kohberger case. And they got a hit on Nilo. And they went and did the 1-to-1 comparison. They got it. They arrested him in New York. That case is working its way through Massachusetts right now. He's going to challenge the IgG, and he's going to win. The thing I want you guys focused on, because this is probably one of the more infuriating things. And if somebody's told you this, I'll shut up. But if they haven't, they are doing a huge disservice to all of the victims' families right now by not giving you guys the lay of the land. The defense is going to buy all the time they can until one of these IGG cases hits a major appeals case or the U.S. Supreme Court. When it does, you can kind of mark my words here. The rule is going to become you have to have a search warrant for IGG. You just have to. Most states have already started to adopt it, but this Nilo case is really likely. He's got the resources, the funding, and the knowledge to take this to the Supreme Court. If that happens, and they actually look at, hey, when you sidestep the search warrant and you step outside policy, IGG is out. If that ever happens, that is Brian's gold card right there. And I think that the defense, they're watching this case very carefully. They're waiting to see what happens with this. And everything you guys are going to see the next year or two is nothing more than buying time.
But would that even matter if he pled guilty? I mean, it's not like he had a trial and then was found guilty, and then he could go back and say, oh, the evidence they used at trial against me, is unfair. Like he still pled guilty. But that had nothing to do with the IGG.
So here's the issues. And there's two huge issues here. And again, Steve, if somebody's explaining this to you, then I'll move on. If not, like you have to be aware of this. The fact that the prosecution probably never told you about Garza versus Idaho, and commit that one to memory. So Garza versus Idaho is a U.S. Supreme Court involving Idaho, where a guy who took a plea deal, who voluntarily pled guilty, actually got it reversed, and he took it all the way to the Supreme Court. So plea deals are not the closing of a case. Plea deals aren't like, okay, we're going to put this behind us. We're going to let everybody get closure here. Anytime a prosecutor frames a plea deal as closure, they're doing a huge disservice, because plea deals get turned over all the time on appeal. The second thing, and man, I am not a Hippler fan at all. I think Hippler made a critical error when he made the ruling that IGG could come in as a tip, so be it. But the moment he prevented the defense from being able to expose to the jury that the lab techs willingly, knowingly violated their own policy to do it, it's not a constitutional issue. That evidence comes in, but it does become a credibility issue. And any other court in the United States, when anybody associated with law enforcement oversteps a policy as it relates to evidence, you got to explain that on the stand. And I think if the prosecution did it right, you can explain that, hey, for the interest of justice, for X, Y, and Z, yeah, we made this tactical decision. But the moment that Hippler made the decision that the jury can never hear about any of that, and the defense is not allowed to cross-examine officers who knowingly, intentionally violated policy on one of the most critical pieces of evidence in this case, that is a judicial oversight. That in of itself, when challenged properly, has the ability to bring this case back. Now, to Steve, to your point, do it right. 10 times out of 10, he gets convicted and maybe more comes out, and it really does put some closure behind this thing. Bring back the death penalty. I am all for this. But I think that I don't agree with the national populace right now that his appeal doesn't have legs, and it's very unlikely it's going to happen. I think there's a couple things that if it falls into place just right, it could happen. So I just say that as prepare yourself, right?
I've talked to some crazy.
Let me pause real quick, because I'd love to hear Nan's comment on this, but let me just address this first. Making changes. Love that you're here. Thank you so much for being a member. We kind of addressed this earlier, and I just want you to think about this, not coming at you, but just think about this. So Bryan Kohberger pled guilty. Okay. He's into the courtroom. He's getting ready to plead guilty. Why wouldn't he come forward at that moment, knowing that he's going to go to prison for the rest of his life and reveal the other person? If you're saying, I don't believe BK did it alone, and there's an accomplice or accomplices, why would he not at that point put all these other people or this other person out there and say, hey, I can't plead guilty. This is someone else that you need to look into. They were the actual killer. I was a driver, whatever it may be. Just think about that. Think about that. And Nan, I'd love to hear some comment on this if you have one.
Yeah, and there's another comment too that I'll want to comment on.
Yeah,
that
sure.
Amanda Wallace just 2 comments up. Amanda had put in there, which I'll probably start on that. She said they should have never allowed the plea without finding out whose DNA was under Madison's nails on the back of the was it under Madison's nails? Yeah, on the back of the sheath and on the walls, because it was not Bryan Kohberger or anyone they did compare to. I agree with that. I mean, maybe they should have, I can't say they shouldn't have allowed the plea, but they should have explored that. Also, it's sounding, I don't know how true this is, but it is sounding from Bryan Kohberger's application that he feels there was hair that was found in a clump.
But that's going to be dispelled.
Right.
Yeah, they tested it.
Was it tested? So the issue is going to be, was it tested, and were the results given?
And they know that, and they're going to explain that here in this pod. Yep.
Okay. And then did Ann Taylor accurately and diligently present it to Brian? It'll be a question for Judge Hippler to decide.
Right.
But then as far as kind of the original question you were asking me, Brian, like, this is probably the most interesting part of the podcast for me when you have Ray going into the Nilo case and the
IGG.
the IGG related issues, the Garza versus Idaho, which did involve a guilty plea being overturned. Just so you all do know, guilty pleas actually happen commonly where they are overturned based on those violations
Wild.
of the Sixth Amendment that I was talking about, whether it wasn't a knowing and voluntary plea, although that's a tough road that Bryan Kohberger has here, or there may have been, if there was in any other case, not necessarily happen in this case, if there was ineffective assistance of counsel or inappropriate advice given, lack of advice given. Ann Taylor doesn't strike me as that type of attorney. She seemed very fastidious, very diligent, but we're going to have to really focus on this because it's very interesting. And this is where he says, like, what Hitler did by allowing IGG, which I think is like a really amazing investigative thing or tool to be used as a tip, and then not to allow, Judge Hitler made a ruling. He was not going to allow the defense to present any cross-examination of witnesses on the fact that lab techs were violating their own policies by exploring the issue of whether or not this DNA was indeed Kohberger's based on the whole family tree and the branches, etc. That's very interesting to me because it does go to credibility and impeachment of witnesses. The jury should have been able, in my opinion, to hear that, okay, wait, they may have gone a bridge too far here. So this is the kind of stuff that maybe not right now, but as these other cases, Nilo and others that are going to kind of make their way through the appellate court system when they're ready, this is the kind of stuff that makes new laws, whether it's search warrants are going to be required moving forward for all IGG related inquiries. That's going to tie a lot of law enforcement's hands. It's going to tie the hands of Othram Labs and other similarly situated labs. This is the kind of stuff that evolves different types of sciences and different laws in different states. So that's where I have a very acute interest in true crime. That's
No,
how the
I just
laws
want to get to
develop.
this, and I'm hearing a lot about this hair. So one piece of evidence he points to involves the hair debris found in Ethan Chapin's hand, which Kohberger suggests that it supports his innocence. Here you go. That claim has a major problem. And why? Reporting indicates a defense DNA expert determined the hair matched Ethan Chapin, not an unknown person.
Where
So
did
that's
you, what was the source of that,
by my
Brian?
reports. I mean, I can look it up.
No, it's okay. That, you're live to tape,
Yeah.
but if it was, I don't know. Like I always tell people when I don't know the answer to something, this is one I don't know.
The bottom line is this, and this is what I want to get across to the audience, and you might agree or disagree with me. If there's an accomplice, thank you, Mary. Mary's very good on this stuff. It's in the court document, and I sourced this out of an article when I was doing stuff earlier. I just don't have the article in front of me, but she's going to email it to me. She's great at this stuff. The issue is if there's an accomplice, okay, and you got to think about this logically. If I'm going to jail going to prison for the rest of my life, and I know that there's someone else, you're not going to rat to try to save your ass at that point, to try to get something off your sentence and say, look, I can give you this other person. Can we work something out? Maybe I only go away for 25 years and this person gets life. And then you turn around and say, hey, I was just the driver, or I was the one that supplied the weapon, or whatever it may be, and maybe lighten your sentence a little bit. We got to realistically think about this. There's no way that Bryan Kohberger would sit inside a fucking cell right now and know that maybe there's another person or two other people that helped him, and he wouldn't turn around and rat this person out. I mean, seriously. I mean, am I wrong on this, Nan? Am I crazy?
It's what we lawyers would say a reasonable person would do.
I mean, people in the mob rat all the time when they get caught. That's why they say they're rats. That's where that comes from.
Sometimes I think about like weird psychological decisions that weird psychiatrically impaired people make. Like there's a movie called I think it's called The Life of David Gale. It was with
Yes.
Kevin Spacey
Yes. It was a rape
and
case, I think.
Laura Linney. And it
Yeah.
was like this weird plotted out R word crime. And I think there was a red rum. I never know the lingo for YouTube. I'm trying to keep
You can just say it.
from getting penalized, but it
Fine.
was like weird because there was maneuvering of the legal system to kind of get away with a crime and see how it was going to work its way through the judicial system. I have no idea if Bryan Kohberger could be doing the very same thing.
But Amanda, you're saying that there's you're basically saying there's an accomplice. So why is he not blabbing this person out? Why would he not come forward and say, I have an accomplice, this is the person you need to look into? I mean, I get what you're saying. You're saying, there's other hair. There's hair that wasn't tested. There's other things. We're going to get the document. Mary's going to email it to me and we can pull it up. But
I love Amanda's opinions. That I mean, like,
I love it.
All opinions welcome.
Right.
I feel like all of this, your invite to me to talk about this case has made me want to dust off.
I know. Now I want to go back into it again. I have the files. I mean, I can send them to you. We can start going through it. I mean, maybe we start, going through these and pulling some things out. Maybe there's something in there that changes my mind. I don't know, Nan. But I mean, for me, it's it's the digital footprint that usually nails all these people. I mean, look at Alec Murdaugh. Alec Murdaugh, they pinged his phone down to 6 inches of where he was that night.
And what Amanda was saying though about, the item 3 says consistent to Ethan's hair, but not tested beyond that. That's actually my understanding of what I read. And that could be a problem because you can have hair that's consistent to someone else's hair, but you have to test it further. There needs to be a conclusory determination that it was Ethan's hair and not someone else.
Why didn't he bring this up in the plea and say, I'm not pleading, we have an issue with evidence here?
Well, so it's so funny because that's where, again, everyone has to look at my opinions as I have my own conclusions I have reached. I'm open to changing my mind, although I have not. But maybe it's going to boil down to the details are in the devil is in the details. Maybe Ann Taylor did skip a little steps with him. Maybe she didn't fully explain things to him. When the courts require and the Constitution requires a knowing and voluntary plea, maybe it wasn't fully knowing and voluntary to him. Maybe he didn't understand. I don't think that's true because she seems very diligent, very attentive to detail. But this may end up getting to an evidentiary hearing where Ann Taylor's going to have to answer questions, and his family may be questioned as well.
So she goes up on the stand?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, sometimes it's done in camera, but yes, you saw it in Alec Murdaugh.
That documentary, The Staircase. They got police officials and lawyers back up on the stand, and wow, I don't know. This is interesting. This is actually turned into a really great conversation.
I know.
Really great conversation. All right, let's go.
Labs. And so there's some multi-billionaire. Okay, his house got broken into. Somebody stole his safe. Didn't just take it. They didn't just break into it. They took it. And long story short, a cigar was left behind. This guy hires a private lab to get a snip off of it, and then uploads it to all and goes and finds the person.
And when we come to find out, there's not much DNA in CODIS. That's why this guy he's the story that Steve's telling. This is why he did this. Here we go.
Robs his house and shot his dog, which is it's like a movie, okay? And he gives it to the cops as a tip, and they said the court he basically arrested this guy and kind of taking shit over it because he was supposed to handle it himself. So, long story short, he starts his own company, and he's just going through certain locations that he's deemed as high risk, and they're just grabbing people's DNA and uploading it as if they own it. But once you abandon your DNA, you don't own it. So then they're making these databases to sell to the freaking cops.
Yep.
It's an I'm going to say he's a criminal, and this is a weird story, but I really don't know he was or not, or he was just a shady business guy. But he found a niche, and he's going in there because the database CODIS is puny. There's almost nobody in it. So they need to get to these bigger ones. And he found this niche, and they're like, we're afraid to work with this guy because we feel like this is going to get shut down. But this is the stuff that's going on, Steve. This is the wild, wild west of IGG.
What were you going to say, Olivia? Were you going to say something?
Yeah. So I guess that I just don't follow the logic completely, that this is not an appeal. This is a post-conviction relief. The relief that he's asking for is for his guilty plea to be removed. Let's say that it's all granted. That essentially puts him back on the trial court. Let's say that they successfully delay until the Supreme Court decision in which it is deemed to be unconstitutional for the IGG process. We're assuming that that's going to be then done retroactively then apply to this case. Let's assume that happens. Let's assume that IGG gets removed. It doesn't change his DNA being a direct match to the DNA on the sheath. So I guess I'm not following how we jump from these things happening. And I know you said that they're unlikely, you were like, if these things all fall together. But I'm not following how these things all fall together to then have the IGG removed, which then puts us in a position where the case is at risk considering the DNA is a match. So maybe the work was ethically budged, but the work itself is good.
Yeah. So let me give you a couple things on that. The best case I can reference you to is Carpenter versus US. And what Carpenter is, it's a bank robbery case, so obviously not anything of the nature of what we're talking about here. But in Carpenter, they do some cell tower dumps and they look at cell phone records, and they're able to place Carpenter at the scene of this bank robbery using cell phone records. But it's the FBI. And, in 2017, well, actually, the ruling's in 2017. The case actually happens about 2010, 2011. The FBI gets involved, and instead of using a search warrant to get the phone records, they use basically what they call an admin subpoena, which is a supervisor at the FBI saying, hey, this is relevant to a criminal investigation, give us the stuff. So Verizon gives them the records, and they put him at the crime scene. They recover some evidence based on the phone records. He goes to prison. It goes on. He finally gets his appeal. It goes up to the U.S. Supreme Court, and this was the first case in the United States that challenged, can law enforcement look at your location data without a search warrant?
Legal warrants?
Yeah, and basically the Supreme Court said, no, looking into your location data is so personal, it requires a search warrant. And this was the landmark case for cell site location information that requires law enforcement. And now everybody except for the FBI was getting search warrants for a decade before this because we all knew where this was going, but the FBI was doing it at that point.
So how does he have a claim?
So it reversed. It reversed the conviction because the conviction was based on the phone records, and the Supreme Court said, hey, you should have had a probable cause search warrant and you didn't. The phone records went away. So they had to retry Carpenter and prove the case without the phone records, which luckily they had a ton of evidence and they were able to do. So that's the first one is, should law enforcement have reasonably obtained a search warrant? And this is my hang up on the Kohberger case. And the answer is so simple. If law enforcement would have written a search warrant for what they were doing with IGG, it doesn't hurt anything. We can seal search warrants. I don't have to release it. I'm going to go back to my undercover days. We did a lot of cartel cases. I was a cop in Arizona, so we had a lot of cartel cases on the border. We used to steal cars to wire them with GPS because we needed to get access on the car to get our GPS in there, right? So we would literally order the key from the manufacturer, and we would go steal cartel members' cars, and then we'd plant the GPS in it, and then we'd recover it and give it back to them. It's a great scam. We wrote search warrants to ourselves so that we documented what we were doing, and there was transparency with legal oversight on our actions. When we allow the FBI to go through back doors and to kind of trick the system, and if you
Brian Entin's like, that might be my next investigative work.
Exactly.
Like stealing cars and recovering back to cartel members so we could track them. I mean, I can't even
He
believe
is
that you just
spilling the
actually admitted
tea.
that right now. How constitutional is that? It's like, yeah, but we got around it because we wrote search warrants to ourselves, and Jesus.
Tie this into your next law enforcement corruption stream.
Yeah, right.
ask them, why didn't you write a search warrant to GED, match GED? Well, we didn't write the search warrant because they wouldn't have given us the info.
I think it was Heritage.
Well, it was Match and Heritage, so both of them. So the idea there is, man, if they reverse that, and then you get Steve Nye, and you talk about somebody who should not have been involved with this case. If you guys haven't seen his, you know who Steve is?
Jeff Nye?
Jeffrey Nye. Sorry, Jeffrey Nye.
Okay.
Yeah. He did an interview in August with Fox News. You guys have to go watch this interview, and he explains the.
I think he actually told this in purpose because Christy Dawn asked him, "What do you worry about?" And he said the same thing.
Who?
And yeah. I've worried about, it's not so much him explaining, because I agree with him. The entire case was hinged on the IGG. It's what he says towards the end when he says, and usually with these type of things, we can argue inevitable discovery. And what inevitable discovery is the Carpenter case. Yeah, we have these phone records and it helped put the case together, but take the phone records out inevitably we still would have discovered all this stuff and we can prove the case. And that's why Carpenter is still in prison today, even though those records got thrown out.
Especially considering it went to Othram first and they found the right tree. They were on the wrong branch. And Leah Larkin herself testified in the Franks hearing that eventually it would have led to him.
100%. 100%. The problem is Jeffrey Nye on Fox TV during that interview said, we didn't even argue inevitable discovery because there was nothing that applied for it. And I'm like, dude, shut up. What are you saying? More importantly than even what Othram found, we have to remember on November 29th, Washington State University identified Bryan Kohberger and the vehicle, realized that he just swapped his plates for Washington plates, and notified Moscow PD. The idea that Bryan Kohberger would have been completely absent of this investigation minus IGG is absurd. All they had to do was follow up on credible leads. That's it. That's all they had to do.
Jesus, man.
Okay. So yeah, I think that we're on the same page.
And I'm not saying I ever think this thing gets reversed. What I'm saying is if you guys as the victims in the case, in all of the victims' families, if you're not being told, hey, this could be 5, 6, 8, 10 years before this thing works itself out in the criminal justice system, you're being misled. The Carpenter case, well, that was a 2011 arrest. That case came down in 2018. And that's just the appeals process. That's not even the initial case. So I think we're in for a very long ride on this. I think there's a lot of things that are going to still happen. I don't know that he's going to get his post-conviction relief. I think they're anticipating that. All that does is now it forces it into an appellate review. And
that's right.
It's the appellate review that I worry about.
Do you think that'll...
I guess I'm not understanding that point either. How does a post-conviction relief force it to an appellate court? Because he won't even get a hearing. His argument is nothing but ineffective counsel, which was asked in the
Kelly
questionnaire that he answered extensively to, as well as life in prison isn't what I thought it was going to be. And I was, quote unquote, threatened by the idea of death row. There's no other meat.
Hair in Ethan's hand.
Oh, okay. Yeah, chunks of hair, which we know is completely fabricated. That's not reality. And his own defense, Ruth Ballard, testified on the 23rd of January that it was consistent with Ethan's own hair. So he can't say that that's exculpatory because obviously the prosecution did withhold that from them. So that doesn't work out either.
Yeah.
So I guess I'm not understanding from how we get to, he's not even going to get a hearing. Mark my words. Let's say that I'm wrong. He gets a hearing. How does that throw it into an appellate when he's not asking for his plea waiver to be removed? He's asking for his guilty plea to be removed.
He's not a lawyer, yeah.
I'm sorry.
He's an officer trying to help us.
Please, you don't know.
No, I get it. I would be so frustrated. In fact, I would be like, just please release the guy. The only thing I ask.
That's why they won't talk to us.
That's how I feel. Just release. Let's just release him.
Yeah, they won't talk to us because these are the kind of questions that we give to Thompson, and Thompson just his eyes start darting.
I don't think it's not an unfair question. Like you said, I don't know that Cy has the answer, but that's what Olivia's asking is really the question. I mean,
here's the thing that we have to keep in mind. The post-conviction relief that he's seeking right now is going to go before Hitler. And I agree with you 100%, Olivia. He's going to turn it down. He's not even going to get a hearing. He can appeal that. This is where Garza versus Idaho comes in. He can say, hey, Hitler's already jaded on this. He's part of the problem. I need the latter side of that initial team to look at this. It's a long road. They're going to have to file their stuff just right. At some point, he's going to have to get a real attorney to get on board. All I'm saying is if nobody's telling you guys that this is possible, I'm not saying it's going to happen. I'm saying it's possible that they're not prepping you guys. The same thing about, hey, if we take this plea deal, we can bring closure to this case. No, it just
exactly that. They told us the opposite. They said, if you guys go with Steve and go for the death penalty, you're going to have hell to pay. But if you just go with, Thompson over here, all your problems go away. And he pleads to it. And you all just go right into the sunset. And now they're all like, I didn't think he could appeal.
Hashing old news.
What's that?
Hashing old news.
Well,
that's sad.
We're still talking to people that are calling me. Like I just had Randy, he could appeal. And we're like,
well, because it's not an appeal. It's post-conviction relief, and it's going to be denied. Because here's the thing. He could have requested relief in the form of having his plea waiver removed, which would have been a hell of a lot more likely for a judge to say, yeah, sure, whatever, have your appeals back. But he didn't do that. He asked for his guilty plea removed, which logically makes no sense, which is why I think Ann Taylor's not behind this at all.
I read something that Ann Taylor signed an affidavit today.
The relief that he's asking for isn't asking, if they're trying to buy more time, give him a route to appeals. Say, just remove my plea or just remove my appeals waiver. But you're trying to remove your guilty plea, which is never going to happen because of the questionnaire that Hitler gave him. It was incredibly extensive, and everything that he brings up in his motion was covered. So unless you're just like feigning amnesia, and unless he truly is just even more stupid than I thought that he was, and I truly thought that this man was stupid, it doesn't make any sense.
Well, and understand
a toddler throwing a tantrum.
Is that passion or what, Nan?
Yeah, I was gonna say that
great.
if something ever happened to me
Yeah.
I would want family like and friends like this
Yeah.
to advocate for me. Look at this. And I mean, Olivia is like leaps and bounds even beyond her parents in terms of her level of advocacy. It's unbelievable. I'm actually getting emotional watching
Yeah.
it.
I love when they're kind of nailing Cy with questions, and then Steve goes, "He's not a lawyer." He's not a lawyer. He's like, "No, but I kind of get what's going on here." It was really great. Brian Entin's doing a phenomenal job. What do I always say, chat? The best interviews do what? Shut the fuck up and let people talk.
Exactly.
Turning down this first motion for the post-conviction relief is another log on the fire for the bigger appeal issue. We're not done with these motions being filed. I think in the next 69 days, like I'm saying, we're going to see a lot more start coming out of the woodwork. This is just step one to get that. There is a very
step one.
There's a very intricate, very well planned out road that the defense is going to go down here. We're just getting started.
Yeah, the minute they thought they were going to do a plea, they probably had a whole exit strategy to be like, this is what we're going to do. And they sold that to him.
So he's not selling out Anne right now? Anne's part of this?
And me, this is just total.
You can just talk.
Just
Side theory.
We're
That's
spitballing.
side theory.
Yeah, we're just spitballing right here.
Yeah.
See, I've always thought the same thing, honestly. I'm like, how do we know that she's not in on this? Say, hey, we're going to do this. Then after a few months, you're going to file, inadequate,
Ineffective
counsel.
An attorney saying, yes, I was ineffective. Like you're looking at motions. You're looking at the evidence that was, attempted to be suppressed. You're looking at, there's so much more that goes into it than just an attorney being like, yeah,
she's essentially going to lay down on the knife, right?
I'm still stuck on what Cy started this whole conversation with, and Christy wasn't here, but that if they had done more digging and processing with the digital stuff, that Cy believes that there's evidence that Kohberger was in the living room at King Road based on.
He's like, wait, like, did you guys went through all of that? But this is like, yeah, I mean, this is. He brings it right back around again. He's like, wait a minute, let's hear about this again.
But she calls him on it.
Yeah.
You just watch. Yeah, I wouldn't mess around with Olivia.
We know that. And did I just miss that
I
somewhere?
knew he was following these girls and stalking them online, but they refused. Nobody investigated if there was an online connection. There's
Are we talking about that night? That night he was in the living room?
No, Cy thinks previously, based on the data that he has from the defense.
So fucking terrifying.
Because we just skirted on past it.
Sorry, I've been thinking about that.
No. You're right.
I'm like, did I miss that somewhere and you guys secretly knew, or I didn't?
I'm going to go a little bit off script here too, and I could be wrong. And this is where I was asking about the VICAP report and all the questions to family and friends, which I can't find any reporting being done.
Never happened.
The little bit that I have dug into, I also believe it's possible that Bryan Kohberger could have been at that house at certain times and not necessarily even been noticed. I think he could have blended in very easy. A large group of guys specifically, but a large group of college kids hanging out around the house may not have triggered what everybody thinks necessarily. I'm not saying that there's evidence of him breaking in the middle of the night and snooping around the house. I believe there's evidence of him late at night being at, near, or in the house, but it's also at high traffic times in that general area. And
they and I think they talk about it here, and I've heard some reports. They think that they spotted him. He's been spotted when they were demoing the house. He was there.
Oh,
watching
really?
the house being demoed. Yes.
Oh my God. That's
in and
creepy.
around that area and spotted while they were demoing the house.
Wait a minute. Wasn't the house demo?
Oh no, yeah, you could be right.
No.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, no.
Yeah, I fucked that up. Yeah,
because he was already incarcerated. But,
right. Yeah.
But I did hear that he was spotted at or near the house at other times.
After the murder. That's what I'm getting tripped
Yes.
up on. That he was seen in and around multiple times around that house after the murders. That I'm sorry.
And
I
that
fucked
would
up.
be,
My brain's tired right now.
And that would be consistent. Well, because we have jobs, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But that
Yeah,
would
I
be
work today,
consistent with psychological profiling.
Yeah.
You know,
I know.
and
The chat's gonna come at me. He was in custody. Here it comes. I'm sorry. It's late. I've been working all day and I'm kind of like burnt out. My mistake. I'm saying that after the murder, he was spotted. There's evidence to show that he was spotted multiple times in and around that area when they were investigating the crime. So sorry, everybody. my brain's kind of on shutdown right now. We're about 10 minutes out to getting this done, and I'm gonna go relax. So, and Nan, thank you for giving me right now 2 hours and 16 minutes of your time. Let's try to wrap this up in the next 15 minutes here. Here we go. Sorry,
I believe he could have blended in really easy. The other thing I'm going to throw back to Steve that is just mind-numbing to me is there is a pattern of him looking at multiple houses. I believe he's a serial killer. I believe that was the intent here, was he was going to start his serial killer spree, if you will. And one thing you have to understand about the psychology of serial killers is part of what drives them, part of what fuels what they're doing is the randomness of selecting victims, watching victims and thinking in their head what they could do. But that is a huge piece of serial killers. And I think he had multiple targets throughout the entire Moscow, Pullman area. And when you look at his phone at night, that's what he's doing. He is going around hitting these different houses, watching people, interacting with them potentially. I cannot find any history where somebody's taken the phone records and mapped out all these locations and then gone to law enforcement reporting to say, hey, what reports of a prowler, suspicious person, stalking type behavior? Like, just give us all the calls for service in these different areas and see, can we match up?
Well, there was a call that never really was looked up on either when that girl called about her underwear and clothing being stolen from her car. And that was like literally right next to the 112 King Road house, just what, a couple of weeks or a month prior to the actual murders. What were you gonna say, Nan?
Yeah, no, I remember that. And that was also notable because I think that came out on Dateline or one of the mainstream crime shows. And they were, I want to say, when they aired that, it was a surprise to law enforcement. I remember seeing something about that where law enforcement was like, wow, how did Dateline get this information? Because all of this was kind of kept under wraps. But what Sai is suggesting here would have yet been another alternate pathway to kind of explore the digital footprint of Kohberger and or any other crimes or sightings that may have taken place in the X number of months leading up to this horrific quadruple murder. I just feel like there were prosecutorial and law enforcement missteps here. Maybe not enough to get him a new, his plea removed or rescinded, but I don't know. We'll see.
Hey, he keeps going back to this other house on the northeastern side of Moscow. Oh, weird. The neighbor across the street has called in 3 times about a white car. Like, how does that change this investigation dramatically? And these are some of those things that I keep saying are just completely absent from this investigation. And the only reason I'm saying all of this part, Olivia, is I want him to get the appeal. I say, let's bring it on, get a new trial, but let's do it right. Let's get the right investigators involved, and let's go show the world just how depraved this guy was. Let's bring back the death penalty, make it happen. I worry that they don't do that and they fall back on this. Well, he's not going to get the appeal. We're not worried about it. Oh, crap. He made the first hurdle. He's not going to make the second hurdle. We're okay. And then all of a sudden we find ourselves in a position 5 or 6 years from now that there is a real possibility of a new trial and they haven't done anything to patch the holes from the first round. And that's where I've been very vocal with anybody who will listen. The time is now to start this investigation over, to do it, just document it, get it done. It's not a crazy expense. I mean, we've done everything at our own expense. I probably have about 50,000 invested in my Kohberger nonsense at this point. Like, there's people like myself and other people and stuff that you guys are doing that you can do this the right way. I think it's all about getting a mental mindset of where this thing can go, being very real and truthful with the victims' families to explain, hey, here's a number of scenarios. And even if it's a 1% chance, it's something that we need to discuss. And hey, how do you combat this? If lightning strikes twice here, how do we make sure this guy never walks? Because that, at the end of the day, is the real goal here. This is why I've been so outspoken, is we can never allow somebody like this to walk, especially
if four murders. The FBI told me, they looked at me like, Steve, I know you're concerned, but do you think somebody with 4 murders is going to walk? We have to do everything perfectly. And it was crazy that when you told me that you felt like there was more mistakes on that side, I was just like, and that was the side I was almost going with. If the other families would have told me, kick Kaylee out and you guys go do your own thing, I would have. But they were like, no, we want you to be the loudmouth and pretend like we don't like you. But the truth is, if you're not here, we're all in fucking trouble because now we got to get our heads out of the sand,
Wow.
So you don't think it was just...
I hit your points there.
Sorry, what were you going to say, Christy?
So you don't think it was just... Sometimes I think that people just put too much thought into it. And I think, look, he happened to spot one of the girls at some point in time. He started following them to their house, started watching them, found out that it was, a house full of girls. Perfect for him, score, everything that he was, really needing and wanting. And he, started planning on, murder. and, you know, obviously had his knife and whatnot. And finally that night he just pulled the trigger and went in. I mean, you know, like I don't understand why everybody thinks it's so elaborate. You know what I'm saying? Like,
well, because that house is a dead end road surrounded by other houses. Okay.
Yeah.
But here's the thing, Mom. He decided back before he ever moved to Washington that he was going to kill someone. He decided way back when that he was going to kill multiple someones if he was able to continue getting away with it. Okay. He walked into that house after 1. He didn't walk out after 4. He didn't anticipate this. He thought he'd be way better at it than he was. But part of his game is that he's a hunter. So it gave him an adrenaline boost to see them out in public, to follow them without them knowing, to do these things until that was no longer giving it. That drug hit wasn't enough until 100%. It just kind of became this. He knew he had to do this. There was no getting out of it. He had a separate bank account with money that he had put in there that he hadn't touched, and he was broke as a joke. It's not like he had a ton of money to spare. Starts using it in cash. Fantasy 101, because at the end of the day, he's just an addict. And the drug that he's chased has always just been different. First, it was health and workout and this and that. And then it was, you know, this grandiose that he's healing his, you know, autoimmune disorders because he's so smart and this and that. And at one point it was heroin even. He's an addict that has always been obsessive and addicted to something. And he became addicted to this idea of chasing this high of killing someone. It wasn't personal.
Kind of sounds like someone we know.
100%. You couldn't have said that better. 100%. I agree with you.
Get off the internet, dude.
And if he ever does walk, he will kill again.
Yeah,
of course he will.
We know they investigated him back in Pennsylvania. It didn't go anywhere, but they definitely were concerned.
Yeah.
No, well, he escalated predatory behaviors until they no longer fulfilled his needs.
So I didn't get Thorn Road right, but was that close? Was that closer than Payne's little loop?
Stop it.
That's terrible. It's about, if you look at where Thorn is and the road comes down, it kind of doglegs, 95 doglegs around.
Okay.
Dogleg, it starts to go straight again. It's the third dirt road after that one. There's a farm that sits right on 95 right there. And that's where he worked his way back up to Thorn, and then he came back down. So he goes across up to Thorn Creek and then back down around. And he actually shoots out back onto, I think it's 195.
That was definitely close. And AI helped me because I was trying to pull the timestamps all together with the 448, and 448 was my source of truth.
That he was stopped there. Cyrus said that he was stopped there for about 10 minutes. We never anticipated that long of a gap that he was stopped there. We always 1 to 2 minutes. So the timeline that we have
gone farther down than he's probably needs to be.
Yeah. So
from the house to where he stopped, I want to say it was like 14.5 miles. And you saw the rate of speed he was leaving the neighborhood at. I have no reason to believe he's not driving 65, 70 probably on the road. There's a solid 10 to maybe 15, depending on how fast he drove. And again, the part I can't stress enough is he goes back to that exact same spot where he stopped the next night.
Because he dumped his stuff right
there. He did?
He goes back.
Holy.
And then goes through the Snake River.
And then as soon as he's there, he goes down to the Snake River, and he doesn't spend any time. He goes to Snake River, and then immediately he's back up 195.
So you think he left the stuff there and went back and got it the next day and then dumped it in the river?
Yeah, and I'll give you guys my theory. I'd be really interested in your feedback here. But looking at everything that I've seen, I believe Maddie was the target. I believe Maddie is who he interacted with earlier. There's some other things that kind of support that. I hope a lot of this comes out at some point. I think.
Sorry, no, but why do you say some things to support that? Is that the cell phones?
Yeah, there's a lot more collisions between Brian's phone and Maddie's phone than any of the other victims. And what I'm saying about collision is they start to occupy the same space at the same time. And there is a little bit more of a pattern to that than with the other victims.
And what do you mean? I know you don't have all the data in front of you, but like in different locations, or like what
would say August 28th, but I could be wrong if that's a Sunday. The first Sunday after the full week of school starting in August, it's Maddie's phone that I think interjects with his phone in Pullman, and this is the apartment complex right next to Brian's. And they start off at like the student center at WSU, and then they move up to an apartment complex. And I think there was an interaction there that could have been the first crossing of paths. There's multiple times around the house that A&W over time, but consistently it's more with Maddie than the other roommate at that point.
He dips into his fantasy fund, and Kaylee's up here. And it was like that's the moment he's going to plan this murder, and she's still down there, and Kaylee's up here hanging out with us. So I totally agree, but I can't say that in a forum.
And you guys know better than I would. I think the fact that Kaylee is in the same bed as Maddie that night is somewhat of a fluke. Like, right, that wasn't something he could have predicted. So what I believe starts as a targeted one victim thing very quickly rolls into two. I think Xana interrupted that, and I think there's great.
That's the scream.
Well, the screen, but also there's really good. So before, in my prior life, before I started doing a lot of the phone stuff, I did a lot of homicide stuff. I was a blood spatter expert. There is excellent blood spatter in this house that, in my opinion, Xana not only interrupts it, but he chases Xana through a big portion of the house. And that's where Xana comes into, and then Ethan comes in.
Man, remember that stream when I said that she interrupted him? I mean, you can go back. Listen, I mean, if you guys really want to know a lot about this stuff, I did streams on this. Like I did. This is before we even knew anything, and we were just going by that probable cause affidavit. I outlined all of this, like him chasing her back to her bedroom. Like, you guys can find all that stream in my Kohberger playlist. Go back. I think that one's called shit. The name of that stream is damn it. I'll find it. I don't want to take Nan too much time.
Okay.
I want to try. But if you go back, maybe The Intruder or something like that, and I actually outline this and map it, and I show with kind of little puppets how this all kind of could have played out in the house. But
And
anyway,
honestly, you can see on the pain on Christy Goncalves's face when Cy Ray says what many commentators have said, which is, you know, Kaylee seemed to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. She was essentially a surprise to Bryan Kohberger, because, like, to be a parent, I can't even imagine that. Like, had my daughter not stayed there that evening, she would have been alive today. And it still hurts her to this day. It always will. It's really, I mean, this is really, really emotional. And I really love the discussion that they're all having. The very sophisticated layers that Olivia and Cy Ray are adding, and then the parents, they're asking the right questions too.
Yeah, I mean, and in another way that we figured out that they were talking, and I was the first that I didn't see anything online about this, but what the timestamps were, and I'm like, wait a minute, the extraction, they're saying timestamps. I go, they were texting in the house. Like, I came to this conclusion way before we even found out that they were texting. You can go back and watch all these streams. I mean, I came up with this stuff years ago on the channel. And I'd love to find that stream about mapping it out. But let's play 5 more minutes here. I got to get Nan out of here. She's so gracious with her time.
Yeah, a few more minutes is good.
Yeah, we got a couple minutes here on the pod, and we'll listen.
And to your guys' point
try to
of
find that stream.
the physical side of this, he's just exhausted by the time he sees Dylan. And that's why Dylan's today. And this changes his plan. And this is really important for the investigators to wrap their head around. The route back was going to be the same route that he took there. I believe he was going to go right back out on Indian Hills, up north to that little crossover road, and then come back north of the airport back in, because he can get all the way to his house and never pass a video camera other than the Indian Hills one. But because 911 is being called, he drops down to the south. So yeah, I think it went from 1 to 2 to 4 very, very quickly. Then there's the interruption, which completely throws him off his plan. He doesn't know what to do, but he's smart enough with everything he has on the criminology side, which, by the way, I completely agree with you, Olivia. He is a terrible criminal. His PhD program is not
box of rocks.
Yeah, but he is smart enough to know, they may be looking for a white car. I shouldn't go driving back up to campus.
Real quick, this is so funny that I found it on this time. Real quick, Nan.
Yeah.
This is the stream. I found it, and we are discussing how we figured out where this is someone that used to come up on my panel. And I said right here, and we break it down. How do we figure out? Oh, they were texting. Bingo. And this is back on 3 years ago, May 21st, 2023. We started to figure all this out. And this stream is called The Encounter. And I actually take through a whole presentation of what was actually going on in that house. And if anybody wants to watch the stream, I urge you to go back. It's an excellent stream. And I figured all this stuff out like prior to all of this evidence coming out. And it's funny that you have experts now, well-qualified expert that's up on this panel saying basically what I predicted. So.
Oh yeah. I mean, you have an entire body of work on this case. And I'm really, as sad as the topic is, I'm really glad that you're discussing it again.
Yeah, I dropped that link in the chat. So if anybody wants to go back and watch that stream, I urge you to. I mean, I said a lot of this stuff about 3 years ago, before we even knew all of this, before there was the evidence dumps and all this stuff. Let's try to finish this out. Thank you, Nan Gallagher, for being here. I appreciate it. Here we go.
4
more minutes.
And the path that you were talking about where he went, I think Indian Hills Road, everything he did was misdirection. So he didn't want to come in from west to east. He wanted to come from east to west. He was playing the same game. So if he did get caught, he wanted it to appear like he was coming from the opposite direction of where he really came from.
Right. I do have to go.
Okay.
But I just want
All right, guys. Man, that was awesome. I really appreciate Cy. And Brian, thank you for putting this together. It wasn't a gotcha. It was organic, apparent, talking with people. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for honestly having such a platform where I do genuinely feel like we have said more in this than we've ever really said publicly. And that's honestly 100% due to you and how you choose to, you know, be a journalist and the open environment that you foster. And Cy Ray, I just wanted to say thank you. You know, it is what it is. I understand what you're saying, and I appreciate your time more than anything else. Just being able to, you know, talk with us and meet on a playing field together.
My little 5 minutes that I have, I'm literally going to go to bed with nightmares now because of the hearing him say that he was in the living room and then hearing him say that he went back to that same spot the next night. I mean,
this is his thought. This is him thinking out loud.
I know, but that just terrifies me. I'm like, oh my gosh, and that he.
There's literally not a single thing scary about him. He's the biggest pansy coward ass that you could ever imagine.
The girls were scared.
Well, of course,
the girls were scared
they were
because of
vulnerable.
his mom, and he doesn't have to
prey on vulnerable people.
Yeah, and same thing, Brian. Thanks for having me on. And I'll throw this out, Steve. I talked about it earlier, and Olivia, it goes to you as well. And if you're okay with it, Steve, I'll just respond back to that. Yeah, I have your email on, I think, the questions that they sent over, that Courtney sent over. I'll respond back to you. I'll give you guys my contact and my phone number 24/7. Anything you guys ever need, or if you need to bounce anything off, let me know. I'm more than happy to sit down anytime, have as many conversations as you want. If there's anything you guys are doing foundation wise or trying to promote some of the change you guys are talking about, I'm super interested. Let me know how we can help if we can. You know, I can't emphasize enough. We are really trying to push this as a really intense training for law enforcement on how to never fall for this trap again and how to prevent a lot of these things. We're getting an excellent feedback on that. So rest assured, the overwhelming majority of the law enforcement community that I'm working with sees where you guys are coming from. Their heart goes out to you guys. The victimization that you guys have been re-victimized by the process is one of the goals I've always had of trying to prevent. Like, how can I? And that's one of the things I got involved in this case on. It wasn't to ever be Bryan Kohberger's defense expert. It was to keep my ethics and say, look, criminal investigations can never look like this. And if those of us who see it and understand it don't stand up and say something, who does? So again, any pain or suffering that I have caused or helped happen with this nonsense, please understand, Ann has never spoken for me. Things that Ann says is not what I said. But my apologies for that if it's caused you guys heartburn, and anything I can do to be of assistance, I'm yours. So for what that's worth.
Appreciate it.
All right, we're just going to get probably some pleasantries here. It does look like it's the end of the interview. Nan, what do you think? I thought this was really great, really telling, very eye-opening. Again, you know, I know Cy gets a lot of shit online. There's a lot of people that kind of go back and forth as some things might have changed in his opinions or reporting. I tend to believe that if Steve Goncalves is going to get up on a panel, and we know how hard and strong he is, and very hard-headed, to get up on a panel and listen to this expert give his opinion of what he's tracked out through the information, I've got to say that it's got to be credible. That's how I feel.
I do. I do agree with you. I think also the fact that you have Cy Ray, a former defense expert, revealing so many different cracks in the armor here, and offering opinions that are adverse to Kohberger, to Ann Taylor. He's prognosticating as to what may come in the next 60 to 90 days and how the appellate trajectory could look if, depending on whether or not Judge Hippler grants post-conviction relief or not. I mean, this is one to watch. And I thought this case went away, right? So
here it is.
You know, honestly, like, I know you're a firm believer in getting justice for victims, and I am as well. And if this is the way this needs to play out, and I agree with Olivia, you know, he's dumb as a box of rocks, Bryan Kohberger. People think, oh, he's so smart. No, I don't agree with that. And I think that there's a lot about him that we and law enforcement don't know. And if this means that he's going to work his way through the appellate system and waste taxpayer dollars, waste attorneys' time, and ultimately be presented with another opportunity and to ultimately get convicted, I'm here for it. Yeah. Because what happened to these, I mean, they were adults, but they're children.
Yeah, children.
Should never happen. Should never have happened. And I think this is a good way to get some answers. So
yeah, and the horror that these families have to live with the rest of their life, even though that monster is behind bars, you still deal and face with that horror every day.
Agreed.
I want to thank Attorney Nan Gallagher for jumping up and going through this pod with me. It was a pretty long stream here. Thank you for doing this late night Saturday night stream.
pleasure.
And again, if anybody wants to go through basically a lot of the stuff that they talked in the end of this podcast, I mean, I talked about it 3 years ago before we even knew a lot of this evidence. Click that link, put it on your playlist or your saved list and check it out. I can't wait to do another one of these again. I think this is something that we can dig into. I like this Nilo case. I think that's very interesting and something to watch as well, pertaining to the IGG. I want to start going through the files again. It's kind of reinvigorated me to do this, and maybe we can pop up in a couple of weeks and do another one of these.
With better internet connection on my end.
Thank you, Nan. I'll let you go.
you.
Thank you for your time. I'm going to close up shop here.
Good night, guys.
All right. Bye. Oops. I think I cut her too early, but okay. Well, thank you so much, everybody. We had at peak like 600 people watching tonight across YouTube and X. I want to thank everybody that chimed in. Let's just show some recognition here. Thank you for all of the support. I appreciate it. And again, I thought this was really interesting to kind of recrack the case here on the channel and go through and see what's going on. It's been a while since we've gone through this, and let's recognize some of these. Harper, thank you so much. Lynn's, thanks for the 10. Chris threw out 5 memberships. Thank Chris. And Wild Horses with the 2 jewels. So thank you all so much. Great stream, really good stream to get back to doing some casework here and talking these things out. Love all of you. Thank you all so much for being here. If you're just catching this on replay, please go back and check it out. If you're new here, make sure to subscribe. And I love and appreciate all of you. And we'll be back soon. Take care, everybody. Have a great night. And we'll be back soon. Let me get my outro here. Good night, everybody. Take care. Bye-bye.